Our opposition to the bill has nothing to do with the content. We are 100% supportive of the message and the intent of the bill. Our concern is, as Senator Kramer mentioned, the General Assembly venturing into the area of curriculum. I'd like to have Dr. Wright share what we're going to be doing in the curriculum area. But before we do, I just want to be very clear, 100%, you have 100% commitment from the state board, the superintendent, and the department to work with this committee, the General Assembly, on incredibly important matters like this. So again, we appreciate this opportunity to be here.
Okay, Dr. Wright.
Dr. Wright.
Yes, thank you. Good morning. I want to, just before I get started, just acknowledge the letter that was referenced. I'm not familiar with the letter of 2019,
Okay,
but
we will definitely get you that if you're not familiar.
Okay,
with it.
thank you. No, I just wanted to let you know, I will definitely look into it. So if you could get it to me, that would be great. So let me begin. I am Carrie Wright. I'm the new interim state superintendent for education. And first and foremost, MSDE and the state board deeply appreciate the goals of Senate Bill 1058 and share the belief that we must educate our next generation in order to position them as future leaders who stand against hatred in all its forms. Diversity is the strength of public education. Equity and excellence anchor MSDE's values toward our mission of ensuring a rigorous and world-class educational experience for every student and every neighborhood. We also share in the belief that social studies coursework can and should be leveraged to challenge hate and build tolerance and understanding amongst our students. COMAR 13A 040801 mandates that our local education agencies offer social studies from pre-K to grade 12, which, quote, shall provide for the diversity of students' needs, abilities, and interests in the early, middle, and high school learning years. This regulation also states that the standards must be aligned to the college, career, and civic life framework for social studies. I want to talk to you briefly today about a process that we are going to be using at MSDE moving forward, which will be much more transparent, inclusive, for developing standards and frameworks. This process will provide multiple opportunities for feedback from many stakeholders. To improve student outcomes and respond with immediacy and efficiency to emergent curricular and resource needs as they arise, MSDE proposes to convene a Standards and Frameworks Review Committee to address the concerns of this legislation, as well as other curriculum legislation. This committee will be comprised of educators such as teachers, administrators, and content supervisors, parents of Marin Public School students, community members such as higher ed, content experts, etc. All members will undergo a rigorous training, and it will be an application process for those that are selected. So in partnership with teachers, supervisors, parents, higher ed, and other educators, MSDE and the state board will undertake this significant review of state standards and frameworks through this committee. In this process, we will be able to include our critical partners in the General Assembly. We will also invite feedback from the public by allowing for a specified time window for review and comment. And following that, the committee will transparently communicate what feedback was received, how the committee plans to incorporate that, and the objective and scope of the committee will be to improve student outcomes by the alignment of standards and frameworks to the emergent needs. This process and timeline will also provide local education agencies with the appropriate amount of time to complete the required curriculum development, training, and procurement of new materials. I want to say that the department and the board respectfully request that this committee consider this alternative path to our shared goal of ensuring Maryland children learn about the importance of contributions of historically marginalized peoples and learn to stand against hate as they prepare to become our future leaders. Thank you.
Okay, we're going to open up questions. Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I understand your position of not wanting to set a precedent of mandating something, but there are occasions that if you don't mandate it, the problem or the challenge will continue to exist exactly in those areas where it's the most problematic. One of the beautiful things about the way we operate in government is checks and balances, and we work with all stakeholders. But there comes a certain point in time that occasionally you have to make an exception because something isn't being addressed. Do you agree that that while we have general parameters on how we operate and work together, that occasionally there are unique situations where we need to mandate something?
Well, I would be of the opinion that we could do this collaboratively rather than it being mandated. The process that I have developed is very transparent and involves many different stakeholders. It's getting a lot of opinions, far more up state because of the way the process is developed. So I would proffer that working collaboratively, we can get to the same solution without having to mandate curriculum.
One follow-up question. And you can ensure that every school district in this state will follow your curriculum recommendations?
Well, our standards are developed statewide. And so obviously it's on the superintendents and the principals and the teachers of those local jurisdictions to follow those state standards. Our statewide assessment is aligned. Any assessments that the state offers is aligned to those standards. So it's incumbent upon the local districts to implement and teach those standards as they have been developed.
And do you have an enforcement capability if they do not?
We have the ability to make that public if we find out that that is not occurring.
To make it public?
The State Department doesn't have, if you're asking for a sanction, I don't believe the State Department has a sanction. But I do know that we have the ability to go in and monitor and to go in and evaluate and to go in and make public what is and is not happening.
Thank you. Thank you,
Okay,
Mr.
just to
Chair.
clarify, I do think it's unusual, but I do think you have the ability to withhold funds. I think
Yes,
that
we
is
do. I
within the
think
scope of your authority. but
Thank
just-
you. So this
Yeah,
state's a little different than the one I just came
No, I
from. So
understand.
still learning.
Totally understand that. Okay, we're gonna go to Senator Washington next.
Thank you. Thank you very much. And we also have to become accustomed to having a more collaborative relationship with the state board, what we've had with the board, but just in general, our education. So, so we're all learning. So in terms of the legislation, if there is a desire to express legislative intent to maybe add to what you are doing, these specific concerns. In other words, that we can, in case, we want for the record, to not have this period in time go forward without us saying something.
Absolutely.
law.
That's the
And-
purpose of this very transparent process that I've developed for the state.
So
So-
for us,
Absolutely.
affirming or directing you to kind of do what you already are planning to do, and that we work collaboratively and that it includes some of the components, whatever the key components.
I think
Would
you-
that be helpful? I mean, I'm just trying to-
Absolutely. And I think you've got, particularly where social studies is concerned, because I mean, history changes obviously as
Yeah.
day go by. And so the priorities are also there. I mean, Senator Kagan brought up the issues around LGBTQ. And
Right.
so that's a part of what we need to recognize as well. And so I think that's where the social studies standards, I think probably need a more frequent revision than probably your English language arts standards might.
Yeah, okay, all right, thank
Okay.
you, thank you.
Any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, let's see, that concludes the bill hearing. Hold on, let me double check. Yeah, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 1058. Folks, why don't you come back up to the table, Madam Interim Superintendent, Mr. Crawford, because we're gonna next take up. Yeah, we're next take up Senate Bill 1102. I see Ike Leggett in the, Ike, are you gonna be testifying, or Rachel Heiss? Okay, we're gonna move to Senate Bill 1102. And signed up on 1102, we've got Clarence Crawford, Dr. Wright. So if you can come back up, we've got Rachel Heiss signed up. I don't know if she'll be testifying or you, Ike, okay. And then John Woolhams is also signed up favorable with amendments. I don't know if John's here. And so we're on Senate Bill 1102. And so we've got again, Clarence Crawford, Interim Superintendent Wright, Rachel Heiss, and John Woolams. And if Mr. Leggett wants to join the table, he's welcome to do so. And again, 1102, and these are the only witnesses on this bill. Okay, so not sure who wants to lead off here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, and thanks again for an opportunity to address you today. We have just a couple of items to go over with you today, and I want to thank and to congratulate you for having us here today. We have some changes that are basically my term, more technically, and time adjustments. The first one is to pillar one of the 5 pillars, early educational children, to authorize local departments of health and social services to share the names and contact information with the local LEAs so that we can ensure that we maximize the efforts, that the contact communication with the community is maximized in a way that we can get a maximum response to that. We've had excellent response thus far, but we believe that there are far more kids out there who need this help and assistance. The families, we could get that to them as well. That we would also clarify the changes to the high quality pre-K and remove that date back from to 2027, as we've done in earlier discussions from 2023. Authorize the straight grants for Patty and Judy centers to include 1 year planning to support the development of new Patty centers. This is crucial in order to have the coordination, because there are so many now that we've included in this entire effort that we need to have this coordination and planning, and we need to have legislation to ensure that that is happening. Add early childhood educators pursuing achieving the high quality PK, moving that and ensure that that is coordinated as well. Pillar 2, high quality and diverse teachers, leaders. Clarify that the National Board Certification, NBC, is for subsidies available to non-classroom educators as well. This had been the case up until 1999, and I think it was an oversight. It was not included in the original bill itself. College and career readiness, that is to, in this case, add the date for the CTE committee established statewide goals to meet the blueprint requirements. That is to ensure that that number, the 45%, which I think we had earlier date, we're going to move that date back as well. And then finally, pillar 5, the governance and accountability, modify the blueprint interim program evaluation due date to 12/1/26, as indicated in the legislation. Want to add anything to those?
No.
Yeah.
Here for questions.
Okay,
Yes.
just here for questions.
Again, back once more. We're here in support of Senate Bill 1102. We appreciate this opportunity. We have been working very closely with the AIB. We meet with them regularly. I'm very impressed that with both groups, our primary focus is on educating children and doing the right things for children. So we support the amendments that are being put forth in this particular bill. We stand by the state board, and the superintendent and the department stand with the AIB and other stakeholders in making these necessary corrections. We recommend a favorable report on Senate Bill 1102, and I'm happy to turn the remainder of my time over to Dr. Wright, who'll share a little bit more information. Dr. Wright.
Okay,
Thank
Dr.
you.
Wright.
Well, good morning. We appreciate your continued partnership in realizing the transformative potential of the Blueprint for Maryland's future. I am speaking in support of Senate Bill 1102, which, as President Crawford stated, provides an additional flexibility toward meeting the Blueprint objectives while remaining true to the overall mission. With this bill, we have 2 critical growth opportunities that are aligned to the MSDE strategic plan. We can expand career ladder opportunities for administrators and instructional specialists who obtain national board certification, a credential known as the gold standard for teaching. We also have the opportunity to increase the teacher pipeline in early childhood education with the pre-kindergarten expansion growth program by hiring non-traditional educators who are pursuing state certification. The bill also allows for careful planning in how we work towards our goal in career and technical education of the 45% of high school CTE students completing a registered apprenticeship by the 2030-2031 school year. This bill would allow the CTE committee an additional 2 years for coordination and planning. Most importantly, we have a chance to give families of our youngest learners the strongest start possible by informing them of their eligibility for publicly funded pre-K programs and possible eligibility for the child care scholarship programs and other state aid. This is what we need to build strong schools, strong learners, strong families, and stronger communities. Thank you for your collaboration.
Okay, thank you. And I should have noted that this is jointly assigned to the Budget and Tax Committee. So we're joined by Senator Rosapep and Mr. Willems. Dr. Wright, could you pass the mic
Oh, I'm
down?
so
Mr.
sorry.
Willems?
Thank you. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, and for all the reasons articulated by Mr. Leggett and Mr. Crawford and Dr. Wright, MABE is here today to testify in strong support of the passage of Senate Bill 1102. As the leaders of our state public education system have articulated, the blueprint is in need of alterations from time to time. In fact, every year since the blueprint was first enacted, a blueprint alterations bill has followed. And MABE is urging the committee's consideration of a couple amendments that we think fit in that groove of needed updates and alterations to the blueprint. The original blueprint law allowed to sunset something called the maintenance of effort escalator, which was a provision that required that counties that fall behind their brother and sister counties in terms of their relative wealth and their investment in their school systems be required to contribute up to 2.5% above maintenance of effort in the following year. A highly successful program that garnered significant increases in local funding for a decade and was allowed to sunset by the blueprint. So we have an amendment that would restore the escalator going forward so that some counties, a relatively small number who hold to that maintenance of effort minimum amount of funding, be required to step up above that on an annual basis. And another amendment would provide a combination of state and local funding for our blueprint coordinators. The state has stepped up to provide annual funding, but not through a regular statutory formula basis that would ensure that there is a county and state contribution to fund those positions and the offices of the blueprint coordinators. There is separate legislation pending in the House that would do that as well, but we think this bill would be an appropriate vehicle to make that change and update and improvement to the blueprint as well. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for any of the panelists? Yes, we'll start with Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So thank you for being here today. What I've heard most from our local superintendents is issues with flexibility, especially with the 75-25. Does this bill fully address that?
No, sir, it does not.
Okay. Is that coming in another bill, or is that just not going to be brought up at this time?
We have not recommended legislation at this point in time. We're trying to work out some type of accommodation. We've given additional time. We provided technical assistance for them to help them in that transition. And hopefully we will come to some meeting of the mind about that without the necessity of legislation. But we're carefully looking at that. But the time frame that they originally thought would happen has in fact been moved back.
Okay. And one other question, I believe, for Mr. Woolham. So with your amendment, so that would require the local governments to put more money in. A lot of these local governments seem like they're already kind of struggling financially with different cost increase. How do we balance that out? They're already struggling. Now they're going to have a mandate to be forced to pay possibly, I don't know how much more, but definitely more.
Senator, it's an excellent question. The 2012 legislation that passed, the maintenance of effort reform legislation that was enacted at that time, included not only the provision like the escalator that requires some counties to step up above the minimum amount of funding, but also clarified a number of waivers available to counties, hardship waivers, and some of the older non-recurring cost exceptions to maintenance of effort. So there are a lot of tools in the toolbox for county governments who feel pressed and can make a compelling case that they are pressed to meet education funding standards, and the escalator doesn't change any of that.
Okay, how many are requesting those waivers now?
So the non-recurring cost waivers for this year would not have been submitted yet, so I couldn't give you that. But those are pretty common, the one-time expenses that are exempt from the next year's calculation of the minimum funding amount. But I don't know that any county has proposed a hardship waiver in many years.
Thank you.
Senator Lucio.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I have a bill, SB 984, with a hearing scheduled for March the 6th with the exact same title. And the items that are in my bill were things that were brought forward to me by my own county. If you would give me a contact, I would be happy to discuss where we overlap and where I might have additional issues. We can do that offline. And if we could merge some of my items into your bill, I can cancel my hearing and save this committee a lot of extra time.
You're talking our talk here. That's good. Okay, we'll take that conversation offline. Any other questions
Who
for
I talk?
the panel? Okay, seeing none. Well, thanks for coming by, Senator Rosapep. That concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 1102. We are next going to move to Senator Watson on Senate Bill 1091. And Senator, you've designated two witnesses. We do have some other folks who've signed up in person favorable straight up, but I've got you've signed up Delegate Denise Roberts. I don't know if she's actually here, but that said, and Sharon Manecki.
Yes.
She should come up. Would you mind if I brought up some other folks who have signed up straight favorable to just maybe join the witness stand? Okay, so I'm going to go with Nadia Graham. Is Graham here? Melissa Roccabono and Riley Sanders here. Over here. Why don't we stop there? Let's take the first group and then we'll have a couple more favorables and then a couple virtual witnesses. And I think that'll be the extent of it. Okay, so Senator Watson, why don't you lead off with Senate Bill 1091?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, and good morning, colleagues. This is an exciting bill for me. In 2006, the Maryland General Assembly enacted legislation aimed at the acquisition of textbooks that were not already available in alternate formats, such as large print or Braille. However, the first local education agency, or LEA, to need a textbook in an alternative format are the ones who are responsible for paying for its production in that format. Any other LEA that needs it, they don't have to pay. Some LEAs have not wanted to spend the money to do this, so they don't and have suggested they will accommodate students in other ways. Those accommodations have been ineffective. This has resulted in some LEAs producing the textbooks in alternate format and others not doing so, which is unfair to a very important group of our population. The consequences are that blind and low vision students often do not receive their textbooks in alternate formats at the same time as their sighted classmates. Sometimes they don't receive the textbooks at all. This bill attempts to solve this problem with three common sense changes to the law. First, the funding scheme for producing the textbooks into alternative formats would shift from the LEAs to the Maryland State Department of Education. Second, and there's an amendment that'll address this, the law would establish a deadline of March 15th for LEAs to make their selections for the following school year in terms of which textbooks they intend to use. This provision has solidified MDE support. The bill currently says January, but the amendment is changing it to March. And third, the law would require publishers who sell textbooks to Maryland entities to provide an electronic National Instructional Materials Accessibility Standard format at the time of the purchase. Here to speak more on the proposed legislation are Ronza Offman, President, National Federation of the Blind of Maryland, and Sharon Manecki, Director of Legislation and Advocacy, National Federation of the Blind of Maryland. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, who would you like to have lead off? We see Ms. Othman is virtual.
How about Ron's?
Okay, well, Ron,
Yes,
yeah, Ron, okay,
virtual.
okay, she's here virtual. That's fine. Ms. Othman, you're gonna lead off. You're here virtually.
Yeah.
And you'll have 2 minutes, and so you can proceed now, okay?
Thank you, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Ronza Othman for the record, and I serve as president of the National Federation of the Blind of Maryland, which is the state's oldest and largest organization of and for blind, low vision, and deaf-blind individuals, including blind and low vision students and their families. Essentially, this bill simply closes some loopholes to make sure that blind and low vision students get their textbooks in the alternate formats that they need, such as Braille, electronic, and large print, at the same time as their sighted classmates. LEAs are not currently meeting the needs of our students, but they're not going to be able to admit to this because that would be admitting to not complying with federal and state law. We just want to make it easier for them to comply with these common sense changes to the current process. The bill shifts the entity paying for the production of these books from the LEA to the Maryland State Department of Education. And right now, the first LEA to need the textbook is the one who has to pay for it. And then it goes into circulation for others to borrow it. Since this is a shared resource, MSDE should be the one to pay for it. The impact of where you live determines if you get your books when you need them. And so the cost of the impact in terms of not getting your book is a lack of equity, depending on where you live in the state. The bill also sets a date by which a curriculum has to be selected by the LEA, so there's sufficient lead time to produce the format that are needed for the books. This is now a March 15th deadline after consulting with entities, including school districts, school boards. This is particularly reasonable given that budget decisions about what is going to be procured has to happen long before that time period. Finally, the bill shifts the time period, the requirement for publishers to provide the book electronically for production, whereas it used to be on demand. If an LEA needed it, they would contact the publisher and the publisher would then provide it. Now, by this provision, the publisher would provide the NMS version of the book upon the purchase. For these reasons, and there's other testimony that will come after me that will help illustrate the problems so that these solutions will resolve, I urge a favorable report. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions the committee may have.
Okay, why don't we, before we go to the panel in person, any questions for Ms. Othman? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Okay, we're going to go to the panel. Is Sharon Minnecki?
Yes, sir.
Okay,
Thank you.
You're going to lead off, and you're
Okay.
going to be on the 2-minute clock, Ms. Minnecki.
All right. Good morning, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I first want to thank Senator Watson for sponsoring this bill, because you don't get any place if there's no sponsor. There are about 1,600 people, blind students in the state. Now, that's a low incidence group. But because it's low incidence, our needs sometimes get neglected. So some of you have said, well, I asked the Board of Education in my county and that we don't have a problem. I'm here to say that they don't know it, but they do have a problem. So I hope you'll give this bill favorable consideration.
Okay, thank you. We've got to get the mic down the table to our next witness and tell us who you are.
Good morning. My name is Melissa Riccobono, and I am a blind parent of 2 blind daughters who attend Patterson Park Public Charter School in Baltimore City. One's in 6th grade, one's in 8th grade. So there's just 2 quick things that I want to talk about. One is that some people say, well, there's so much technology. Why can't these books just be available online? I have a Braille display here, and yes, I can put a book into a Braille display. I can use it on my computer too to read a book in Braille. That's great. The problem is graphics and maps. If you have a map of something or a graph, there's no way that you can understand that map or graph with just the description that you either read on a Braille display or is said to you in an audio form. If people don't have the map available that the other students have, sometimes that is very problematic. For example, there are some times where there's an atlas that's available and it has a map of just the mid-Atlantic states, just the northeastern states, just the southern states. Okay, all that is great. You can figure out what state is what. But if you don't have the big picture about how all of these states fit together and make the whole United States of America, you're at a big disadvantage. The other problem comes with standardized tests. There are standard ways to present maps and graphs on these tests. Like them or not, they're not going away anytime soon, and blind students are at a very huge disadvantage if the first time they are seeing materials presented in a standardized way is on that standardized test, and they have not had any other ability to interact with those materials made in this standard way. So I definitely urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Great. We're going to go through the whole panel and then we'll take some questions. So, yep. Okay, you go next.
Good morning. I'm Nadia Graham. I'm a high schooler. I'm a senior at Centennial High School in Howard County. I'm taking a statistics class right now, and it's a whole year, and I don't have a textbook, and it's February. And so I have it online because my vision department converts it for me, but that's not super helpful because I need to read formulas. I need to read tables and specific graphs and how lines are, like, how they're important. And counties that are less affluent than mine don't do that for students. So yeah, I urge a favorable report.
Okay, thank you. Let's go to the next witness. Tell us who you are.
Hello, my name is Dominique Sanders. I'm a parent of a blind child. She goes to Catonsville Middle School, which is a mainstream school. We have ran into multiple issues with her getting textbooks, her getting work. It has become, she is passing. However, I don't want it to fall whereas though she's passing just because they're passing her and not because she knows the work. There's been multiple incidents where she's been able to avoid tests. Homework has been given multiple times, but given actual more dates that it can be turned in versus the other children that have to turn it in on time due to them not having the materials. It's very important that just because she's visually impaired, she still needs the skills to be able to survive and learn. And due to her not getting them on time or not getting her dates when other peers are supposed to, she shouldn't be given more time just because it isn't given to her. And this bill would help tremendously because overall everyone would get their books, during the same time. She is the only vision impaired student in her school. However, prior to her attending that school, she did go to school with, when she was in elementary school, she had two other kids that were visually impaired. So we all kind of, as parents, we kind of got together and ran into that issue. She does get books on the computer, which technology will read them to them. However, when it comes to math and graphs, it's very different. I have been working with her teachers as much as possible. However, this will really help as far as her getting them on time and being able to do it on her own instead of being, her hand being held. So I really appreciate the time you guys are taking out for this bill.
Okay, thank you very much. Does Riley Sanders?
Oh. Hi, my name is Riley Sanders. I'm in 6th grade, and I have many experiences with not getting my textbooks on time. We're still waiting for my 7th grade textbook that will arrive in November, which will not be helpful to me because I need it when the school year starts like my other peers. The textbook that I needed this year came 6 months late, and I was very late with all my work, so I had to hurry up and do it while my peers were all where they needed to be. And
one of my books was also 6 months late, and it wasn't the right book. It was a world history book that was not the class I was in. I was in math class. So they need to fix this quick. Thank you for your time.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for any of the panelists? Okay, yes, Senator Hester.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I just wanted to give a shout out to the student from Centennial who I've met a couple of times. I appreciate your advocacy, and if we can help at all, like, in Howard County, please reach out to my office. You did a great job today.
Okay, any other questions or comments for the panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you very much for your testimony. Delegate Roberts did show up, and Sarah Watson did ask for permission to allow her to testify here. So yeah, if you want to come up to either the table or the podium, whatever you prefer. And then after that, we do have one virtual witness, Mr. Hare, who we see. So after Delegate Roberts is done, we'll take you, and then we'll be done on the bill. So Delegate Roberts, floor is yours.
Thank you so much, Chair Feldman and Chair Kagan. I'm not sure if she's here or if I've met her. Esteemed members of Senate Education and Energy and Environment Committee. For the record, my name is Delegate Denise Roberts, and I'm honored to come today to advocate for the passage of Senate Bill 1091. I am the sponsor of this bill on the House side. If this bill is enacted, it will serve as a beacon of equity and opportunity for blind and visually impaired students across the state of Maryland. At the heart of this legislation lies a simple yet profound principle. Every student, regardless of their ability, deserves equal access to educational resources from day one. As it stands, the current system fails to uphold this principle for blind and visually impaired students, leaving them at a distinct disadvantage compared to their sighted peers. I want to be clear, this bill is not intended to be a punishment. Instead, it is designed to help the state fix a problem. It strengthens the current law by closing some minor gaps that will make a major difference in the lives of blind and visually impaired students in our state. Right now, the state has no data on this segment of the student population who are not receiving their textbooks. As a parent, I find this frightening. This bill will enable them to collect the data so that blind and low vision students will not fall through the cracks, because even one child is too many. Senate Bill 1091 will provide coverage for alternative format production. It will establish a textbook selection deadline and require publishers to provide electronic versions of the textbook. For these reasons, I urge each member of this esteemed committee to consider the profound impact of this legislation by supporting Senate Bill 1091. We affirm our commitment to fairness, inclusivity, and excellence in education for all Maryland students. And for these reasons, I respectfully urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 1091.
Okay,
Thank you.
Did you already have the hearing on the cross file?
I did.
Okay, we'll work on trying to get it over here. So,
Thank you.
okay, any questions for Delegate Roberts? Okay, seeing none. We're going to take you up, Mr. Hare. We see you virtually, and you're going to be on the 2-minute clock. And why don't you proceed?
Thank you very much. And it's good to see everybody, especially these young people and parents and our friends at the NFB and these your leadership, everyone. Thank you so much for championing this important legislation. My name is Robert Hare. For the record, William Robert Hare. I am the superintendent at the Maryland School for the Blind. And today I'm here to advocate with all of you on this important bill, which is crucial for ensuring that Braille readers have access to textbooks, which it seems like a it makes perfect sense that everybody should have textbooks like all their peers. Now, I oversee the Maryland Instructional Resource Center, which is a partnership between the Department of Education and the School for the Blind. We order all the Braille books for all the students that I know of in the state of Maryland, and we help get those books out to everybody. What I did not know, and what we don't have a lot of data for, which was mentioned earlier, is how many students or school systems can't afford to purchase those books when they're really expensive, $20,000, $30,000, $40,000 for a single Braille textbook. They're very expensive books. I did not realize that sometimes left in the shop, they're just too expensive. So this bill helps to eliminate that obstacle for local school systems to provide these books for these students in a timely manner so that they can learn with their peers. It also, there's this other thing that happens. The teachers of the blind end up brailing and creating materials, spending inordinate numbers of hours behind the scenes when their students don't have the materials that they need. It's very unfair. And then the students oftentimes listen to books orally and don't get to keep up with their peers as they would normally do. So for many, many reasons, this bill makes sense. I support it. And I thank you, NFP, for your leadership, and parents and students for speaking up, and leaders for your leadership on this bill. And I support it. And thank you all for your time and your diligence behind this.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Hare? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 1091. We're next going to go to Senator Hester, Senate Bill 797. And you've designated a sponsor panel that includes Rachel London, a virtual witness Leslie Margolis, and in person we've got Coney. Yes, Mr. Hare, we're okay. You can leave. We're good. Okay, Coney Nepo Musino from the ARC. There are some additional witnesses, but those are the ones, Senator Hester, you've designated as your sponsor panel. I know that one of your witnesses may have a tight deadline as far as having to depart at 11 o'clock. So we're 6 minutes until 11. So we've got a little time to fit them in, but you can lead off. And Ms. London, I see, and we've got the other couple other witnesses. So why don't you start, and then hopefully we can fit whoever's got the 11 o'clock timeline to they can get in and get out. Okay, 11. We're at Senate Bill 797.
Thank you. Thank you very much, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, Senator Katie Fry Hester here to ask for your favorable report on Senate Bill 797. As you all know, state and federal law requires the provision of a free and appropriate public education. And for students with disabilities, this includes the development and implementation of an individualized education program, an IEP. These are generally developed by a multidisciplinary team of educators and related service providers, as well as the parents of the student. Now, generally these processes go well, but sometimes there is a disagreement. And when there is a disagreement, it's really helpful to have the support and assistance that helps parents advocate for their children. And so basically what this bill does is it sets up a framework to do that. This has been an issue that I worked on for several years. You may recall previous bills that we talked about shifting the burden of the proof. This is an innovative solution which does not shift the burden of proof. So basically what the bill does is it establishes the access to attorneys, advocates, and consultants for special education program. This will provide funding for resources and services to eligible students with disabilities and their families who need legal advocacy and consultant services to advocate for their children. It requires that the funds be used only for the services provided to eligible students by attorneys, advocates, and consultants. And it requires outreach and education activities, outreach through the IEP process. It also identifies that the intent of the fund is mostly about 75% of the funds to pay for consultation, representation, and advocacy prior to the hearings or court proceedings, which I think is a brilliant way to try to manage these before they get to court. And so in a nutshell, what this does is it really ensures that every parent, regardless of their socioeconomic position, can have access to those services so they can best advocate for their children, thus leveling the playing field. And with that, I will ask for your favorable report and turn it over to the panel. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Who's got the 11 o'clock hard deadline? Is it one of you?
Yes.
Okay,
me.
why don't you go first then?
Oh, thank you so much. I appreciate it. Happy Friday, everybody. Thank you so much for your support and Developmental Disability Day last Wednesday. My name is Connie Nepomuceno. I work at the ARC Maryland, and I'm the Director of Family Resources and Outreach. I strongly support SB 0797, not only as a non-attorney special education advocate, but also as a proud Hispanic parent of a child with a disability who currently has an IEP. Unfortunately, when my son was first diagnosed, I didn't understand my rights, I didn't understand my options, and I felt completely intimidated by the school for professionals who I thought knew what was best for my son at that time. My son never received a Maryland IFSB, and he didn't receive services until a year later when his IEP was implemented. If I had had legal representation, my child could have received early intervention services. During the pandemic, I tried to get legal representation for compensatory services for our child, but I did not have a chance to gain legal representation that would have helped me to make a concise decision and help me prove to the school the long-term impact of my son not receiving what was indicated on his IEP. Hiring a special education attorney has never been an option for our family. I have been quoted fees that seem to be astronomical to the average family. Supporting SB 0797 is critical for parents just like me who face income disparity in access to attorneys, advocates, and consultants. It is not uncommon for costs to appear to be the behind-the-scene driver for decisions regarding a child's education plan. I often see parents who have legal counsel are more successful than parents without counsel. How is that even fair to the students? I ask the parent voices are meaningfully included in the process of SB 0797. Providing funding for resources and services to eligible students with IDD and their families who need legal representation, advocacy, and consultant services will help families have a better understanding of the benefits, requirements, options, and empowering them to make well-informed decisions. Thank you so much.
Okay, and it's 10:59. We got you in right before lunch.
Thank you.
Very
Thank you so
efficient
much.
here.
That threw me off a little bit, just
Okay.
for the record. Thank you so much.
Okay, we're good. So who wants to go next?
Good morning. My name is Megan Conca, and I stand here before you this morning as a mother of a special needs child. On January 7th of 2020, my son was diagnosed with moderate nonverbal autism, global developmental delays, pica, and sensory processing disorder. Shortly after that, he received a feeding disorder diagnosis from Mount Washington. SB 0797 is so important to families like mine, and I believe this bill will pave the way for other states to make important and much needed changes to special education. This bill will establish and provide access to advocates, consultants, and attorneys for the special education program. It will not only give access to supports that parents and caregivers need, but I believe it will also reduce the number of families that request mediation because they will have someone with the right expertise providing guidance and support throughout the special education process. When the time came for my son to start school, I knew that he needed special accommodations and support, so I started the IEP process. I realized after my first team meeting that it really wasn't a team meeting at all. It was me against the school. To give you an example, my son is nonverbal, and I'm currently advocating for more speech services in school. At the present moment, my son receives 2 30-minute speech sessions a week in a classroom setting, which is not enough for him. I ended up hiring an advocate to assist me with navigating through this process, but I started to think about others in my position and what happens to the parents and caretakers who can't afford an expensive service like this. And most importantly, what happens to the children? I will tell you, children go through school not getting the services and supports that they so desperately need to thrive and improve the quality of life because they can't afford to pay someone to advocate for services that should be available to them without pushback from the school system. I respectfully request a favorable report on SB 0797. It's time that we not only acknowledge the struggles and challenges that families face, but we do something to change it. Thank you.
Okay, Ms. London.
It's good. Good morning again, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. For the record, I'm Rachel London. I'm certainly not going to talk about the benefits after that, but do want to point out that one of my council members provided written testimony as an autistic parent of an autistic child. But I do want to talk about a couple of technical things. First, about the financial eligibility. The bill specifically sets out those guidelines a little bit higher than what we usually see so that more families can be eligible. So it sets out guidelines at 150% of the current MLSC guidelines. Give you an example. The current guidelines without that increase for a family of 4, the income can be only $68,000. Using this higher amount of 150%, the income of a family of 4 can be up to 102. Both are still very low. But
making it hard to hire anyone, as you've heard. And this allows not just low income, but those moderately low income families. So second thing is, who's going to help these families? The Maryland Volunteer Legal Services is going to help. They're going to figure out who those people are. They're going to create a list of advocates, attorneys, and consultants. But before they do that, they're going to develop the criteria for the qualifications to get on that list. So not anyone. There are going to be specific qualifications for each of the three groups to meet in order to be able to participate in this program. And finally, just want to note that they are also required to do outreach about this program throughout the state, creating equal opportunity for families throughout Maryland to benefit from this fund and this program. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator Hester or the three panelists? Okay, seeing none, we do have three witnesses virtually signed up straight favorable, and let's try to get them in the queue here. We've got Leslie Margolis, Christina Easton, and Ashley Toller. Okay, so I see Miss Margolis. Okay, I think we got everybody. So let's start with Miss Margolis. You were first on my list here. So again, Miss Margolis, you're going to be on the 2-minute clock, and you've signed up straight favorable.
Yes, thank you. So good morning, Mr. Chair, Madam Vice Chair, members of the committee. My name is Leslie Margolis. I am a managing attorney and policy counsel at Disability Rights Maryland. DRM is the protection and advocacy agency for Maryland. We do handle individual cases, but we have very limited staff and resources, and our focus really is on systemic impact. During 2023 and the first month and a half of 2024, we received nearly 500 requests for assistance just with special education matters. And more than half of those, we needed to provide only information and resources to families, knowing that for a lot of those families, those resources were not going to get them the help that they needed because of financial reasons. We maintain a pro bono panel. We currently have 46 students waiting for pro bono attorneys. With the other half of those cases that came to us, the intakes, we took some cases, we provided technical assistance, and then we maintained the pro bono list. We know that representation and access to assistance really makes a difference for families. In our experience, families who have assistance at the IEP meeting stage often are able to resolve their issues, and they secure appropriate services for their children. But even beyond the legal and the advocacy assistance that results in positive results, what we hear from families is the dynamics of meetings are different when somebody is at the parent's side. But not every situation needs an attorney. So one of the strengths of Senate Bill 797 is that it allows families to choose the assistance that makes sense for them. They can get an advocate, they can get a consultant, or they can get a lawyer based on the needs of their children's situation. So this is really a program that will assist families and students. It will promote equity by giving families without significant resources the ability to advocate for their children, and Disability Rights urges a favorable report, and I'm happy to answer any questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. We've been joined by Senator Heddleman because this bill is jointly assigned to the Budget and Tax Committee. We will next go to Ms. Easton. You've got 2 minutes and you're signed up straight favorable.
Good morning. Thank you, delegates and members of the committee, for your time and attention, and to all who have put work towards making this bill possible. As you said, my name is Christina Easton, and I'm here to give favorable testimony for SB 0797. I'm here as a former special educator and a Baltimore City Schools principal, and as a parent. I have sat in countless IEP meetings and written IEPs as an educator of other people's children, and I am proud of the relationships I built with families. That doesn't mean families always trusted me or the school. Trust was built over time. I am now the parent of a 4.5-year-old non-speaking autistic boy, and despite my professional experience, I am terrified and overwhelmed. Approaching our first IEP meeting, I have not built relationships with the school system that will receive my child. Having access to advocacy or legal services and advice should challenges arise would not only allow me to feel prepared and secure in my questions and goals for my child, but also help me feel confident that everyone at the table is accountable to my child's best interests, so that I can begin to build trust with a large system that might struggle to meet his specific needs. Raising a high support needs child is expensive. Despite having health insurance and a decent income, my family's financial health suffers the weight of copays, additional services, equipment, and specialized childcare and programs, not to mention the time spent researching and learning about supports we need. With every phone call, dollar spent, hour spent researching, I cannot imagine the burden on families that don't share my professional experience and resources. This bill addresses both the research and cost burden on families by requiring dissemination of information about the program to families and by using an income cutoff of 150%, the MLSC guidelines. I ask that you give this bill a favorable review for the sake of my child and the many children behind him who need it even more. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Well, any questions for Ms. Easton? I think Ms. Margolis is still on the line. Any questions for the virtual witness? Okay, seeing none. Ms. Toller, you're next up and you're on the 2-minute clock.
Hello, Chair and members of the committee. My name is Ashley Toller, and I am the Advocacy and Policy Associate with Maryland Coalition of Families. We are testifying today in support of Senate Bill 797, submitted as also our written testimony. Last year, we served 4,603 families, and nearly 70% were families with children. We provided these families support and had given them a total of 677 education resources. In some cases, children fall behind grade level due to not being able to access services requested and our services are not implemented that are on the IEP. For example, a mom had made several requests for an IEP meeting for her child with an identified disability and was denied. The school recommended the child be transferred to an alternative school. Mom contacted our services for support. Mom had been requesting an IEP meeting for quite some time. A meeting was set up and services were placed on the IEP. The services were not followed through and another meeting took place. After continued issues, the services on the IEP not being utilized and the child being suspended more than once, we referred mom to an attorney, but mom was unable to afford. For context, this was a second grade student and requests for an IEP started when the child was in kindergarten. We have also seen an increase over the past 2 years in families our bilingual team serves. This bill will help to ensure those that qualify have equitable access to these services. This bill will provide access to advocates and attorneys and will provide voice for those families that otherwise may not be able to access these services. And I request a favorable report, and that is all. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from Ms. Toller? Okay, seeing none. We do have one additional witness. I don't know if I see Mr. Wallum here. He was with John Wallums from the Maryland Association of Boards of Education. Oh, there you are. Okay, you're signed up fair with amendments. So why don't you tell us what kind of amendments you're are proffering here? And you've got 2 minutes.
Mr. Chair, members of the committee, John Willems representing the Maryland Association of Boards of Education, testifying in support of Senate Bill 797. May believes that this bill is an innovative and appropriate way to enhance the communication, engagement, and really the success of students related to the special education process, the explanation of the services to be provided by the school system, the parents and families' questions through the IEP meeting process. As this committee has often heard on this issue, it is a daunting process for a parent to confront a team of expert educators and administrators in the school system, and high quality representation in that process is only going to be helpful, at least in the ideal world. The amendment that may suggest and request would be to insert a reference to training. Initially had asked for a definition of advocate. The bill provides a definition of consultant. In working with the advocates for the bill, rather than define advocate, reference the term training specifically. There is criteria referenced in the bill for the Maryland Volunteer Lawyer Service to use to determine eligibility to be on the referral list, determine the required qualifications of attorneys, advocates, and consultants, but believe that it would be appropriate for families and the school system to have an assurance that there was some level of training provided to the non-attorney and non-consultant advocates who will be eligible to be reimbursed for their services through this program. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for Mr. Wallums? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 797.
Thank you.
Thank you, Senator Hedelman, for joining us. We will next move to Senator Solling, Senate Bill 612. Senator Solling, you've got there's one witness signed up in person favorable, Lorna Henry. Is Ms. Henry here? Okay, Ms. Henry, why don't you come up? And then we do have a couple of unfavorable witnesses as well. So why don't you lead off on Senate Bill 612, Senator Solling?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee. For the record, I am Senator Johnny Ray Salling, the 6th District of Baltimore County. We'll talk about boards of county boards of education, volunteer aides, chaplains in school. This bill consists of enabling legislation that will allow all local boards of education across Maryland and Baltimore City to use chaplains or spirits advisors as a volunteer aid in schools to provide service to students and staff. Chaplains play a vital role in fostering a sense of community and inclusiveness within the school. They organize events such as multiple culture celebrations or interfaith dialogues that promote understanding, respect, and cooperation among students from diverse backgrounds. During times of crisis and tragedy, such as the loss of a classmate or natural disasters, chaplains can offer immediate support and counseling to students and staff. They can provide comfort, empathy, spiritual guidance to help individuals cope with difficult circumstances. Chaplains can provide a safe space for students to discuss their emotions, fears, and concerns. They can offer spiritual guidance and comfort to those who may be experiencing personal or familiar difficulties. This bill does not especially address background checks or risk assessments, situation awareness training, similar measures, because the Maryland Code, it personally engages in direct contact with student must undergo these central training programs to maintain eligibility to offer those services. For those who are opposed this bill, I invite them to check out the Maryland and the Education Code, Section 6112 and Section 6113-2. And I have an amendment that will add spiritual advisors to the language of the bill. I have drafted another amendment that will add a definition of chaplains as ministers, rabbis, priests, imams, lay leaders, or similar functions of faith group that is qualified for spiritual, intelligent, emotional service as a chaplain in a school district. The description is clearly stated not only in the purpose paragraph of the bill itself, but in Amendment 2, Section A, subsection 1 through 3. I have added another amendment that will state that a chaplain must be sensitive to religious morals and be able to provide for the free exercise of religion by all students. Remember, this is volunteer, and this student has to approach this chaplain. This is an amendment also that I've added in Section 3-3. I would like to make it clear that this bill does not require still a student to use a volunteer chaplain services. It's entirely their choice. In closing, I presented of chaplains, I can offer the involuntary service to students, providing a safe space for emotional and spiritual guidance. And I just want to say, I know there's a few that are against this bill. And I'll say this again, Mr. Chair and committee, not one person that's against this bill has counseled, talked to me in any way as my office has been open. They have not come to me, not one person against this, and talked to me about it. I wish they would have. I am more than open to talk to anybody that's against my bill. I'm more than willing to sit down and have a conversation with them, but nobody's come to me, but I know there's some that against it. And I'm here to tell you again today, if they're willing to sit down and talk with me, I'm willing to talk with them and work with them in any way, shape, or form. And I know you would do the same if anybody was against your bill, that you would be happy sit in and talk with them, Mr. Chairman. And I thank you for this opportunity, and I hope and pray that you can have this bill passed, as volunteer chaplains could be a service to our students in times of serious situations that could happen in our school. That if a student is walking down the hallway and is troubled, that they'll have somebody to speak to at least, and won't do something detrimental to another student or a staff member. We need to protect them. And we are very short in counselors also, very short, and they need help and assistance. And this is just another way to help and assist them. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay, let's go to Ms. Henry. Again, you're going to be on the 2-minute clock. Okay, 2 minutes.
Thank you. Good morning, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Lorna Henry. I'm an attorney with the Pacific Justice Institute, a national nonprofit law firm focused on religious freedoms, parental rights, and other civil liberties. And I am their attorney for the state of Maryland, and we support this bill. You have my written testimony, which lays out some of the many benefits of using chaplains in schools. And in my humble opinion, this bill is probably one of the easiest bills to review and to pass, with potentially some of the greatest impact to student success in public education. First of all, there is an indisputable need to improve so many aspects of public education in general, and also in the state, including in the areas of student mental health, learning proficiency, graduation rates, bullying, and student safety. This bill gives local school boards another tool in their toolbox to address these issues. This bill does not require the use of chaplains in public schools, but simply gives local school boards that option. This bill does not require funding from the state. Chaplains will be serving as volunteer aides. As it is written, this bill does not require that chaplains be of a certain faith, and there is no establishment of religion or constitutional violations here. This bill simply recognizes what our military, our federal government, our hospitals, and other institutions recognize, which is that chaplains are indeed effective in addressing the needs of the people they have the privilege of serving. The overall goal in our case and with this bill is to help vulnerable kids and teenagers in public schools in whatever way we can. And chaplains are a great tool to do just that. I ask that you issue a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for the sponsor, Senators Johnny Ray Sowling or Ms. Henry? Okay, seeing none. We do have one witness signed up unfavorable and then one virtual witness signed. Oh, I'm sorry. Yes, Delegate Carosi.
Yes.
Senator Carosi.
Thank you. Senators, thank you for the bill. And I was going through and listening to your presentation, and you talked about your amendments, and it seemed like your amendments were either, maybe trying to anticipate the possible objections of those who aren't supporting it at this time. Could you just flesh out those amendments and, why they're important to the bill?
These amendments are just ones that I believed that doesn't give a right to anyone because of religion. Just because have religious backgrounds, even though these that have the background of all the training that are not just qualified, they're certified to do this type of training. And so giving them an option, of course, that would cost the state of Maryland zero, not 1 penny, but give them the option and opportunity just to be beside a student, just to counsel them and having them open up to talk to them. I believe there were groups that were against that for that reason, for religious reasons, even though, just to let you know, in the student handbook, student-led, what this would be, student-led prayer is in our handbooks, and they can be led by students. They can do that already. So it's nothing against that, but it just shouldn't be also anything against this. And I believe that was one of the problems.
So, and then the question that's come up about background checks that are already required of volunteers in the schools anyway. And
they already covered, yes. It's already happened, yes.
Okay,
yes.
thank you.
Thank you.
Senator Brooks.
Yeah, thank you.
Senator, yeah, this could either be for you or the attorney. The first thing that came to mind was separation of church and state. How do you deal with that?
Well, I believe that that statement that's been said many a times is literally reversed, because the church is supposed to be over the state, not the state over the church. And if you look at the backlog, that's exactly how it was supposed to be. But at the same time, we've taken the church out of everything. And I think we need to go back to things that I believe that are just basic in our common sense. And they are just approach for our children to have the liberty and freedom that if they want the counseling by somebody else and not by a counselor or school, and give that option, it's just another option for them to get that freedom and that liberty to have it. If it is a priest, if it is a rabbi, if it is someone else. And I don't think we're crossing a line, because the student can approach them and can speak to whatever they want to speak about in concern of that person that would be there for them, because maybe we're going to stop that student from doing something detrimental to themselves, let alone to somebody else. So I think more than anything, if we can just look at this as an observer, as a helper, as an assistant to our counselors in our schools, which again, we're very short on, and we know that, we've talked about that many a times. I don't think we're crossing a line there.
Ms. Henry, being a lawyer, don't you think you'll possibly be setting yourself up for some legal challenges?
Not with this bill, and I'll say why, and my written testimony goes into that further. So there's Supreme Court precedent that addresses what would constitute an entanglement between church and state, and they look to whether or not there's a level of coercion. And my written testimony cites those cases. There's a recent Supreme Court case, Kennedy, I don't remember the exact name, Kennedy versus Bremerton, I think. But so you look at whether or not there's coercion. In this case, and the way the bill is drafted, no student, it appears, would be coerced to use a chaplain. And if that were a factor, that could be an amendment. And that's why I think this is not a difficult bill to pass, because there's no requirement that chaplains be used. It's an option. It should be one of many options. The bill also states that chaplains will not replace educational personnel. They're not replacing any other tool that the school is free to use. It just gives additional options, which is what we need, because there is a shortage that needs to be met. So there is no coercion. And there is no constitutional violation as it relates to separation of church and state.
And also, if I could say, they're already doing this in 18 states already in our country.
I would also add, if I may, so the
Why
federal.
don't you just make it your last word? Yeah. Go
Yes,
on.
sir.
Can't go back and back. Okay, go on. No, you could, why don't you, one more.
Okay,
response.
so the federal government already allows chaplains. We have the US House of Representatives, we have the Senate, we have the FBI, we have our military. And so that there's no infraction in that regard between church and state.
Thanks, Chair.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have again, one witness signed up unfavorable, Rob Hoffman. Is Mr. Hoffman here? Why don't you come up, and then we have one virtual witness unfavorable, and that'll extend the testimony. Okay, Mr. Hoffman, you've got 2 minutes.
All right, sounds good. Hello, everybody, and a happy Friday. My name is Robert Hoffman. I'm the State Policy Manager for American Atheists. We are a national civil rights organization dedicated to equality for atheists and non-religious people. I have written testimony for and against dozens of bills, and I'm here today to say, unsurprisingly, that I am here opposing SB 612. SB 612 is just blatantly unconstitutional, and it would result in religious coercion in the Maryland public school system. It would allow for chaplains in public schools with little qualification to proselytize to youth. It's a clear separation of church and state violation. I mean, it's laid out right there. I know other states are trying this, but it's clearly separation of church and state. I am aware that Maryland, like other states, I live in DC, is having a counselor shortage. I understand that. I think something that I would pull from DC, this is a bit of not a one-to-one comparison, as an alternative, is we have a pilot program right now to spend $6 million over 4 years to fund masters in social work for free. I think something that this committee could consider, this is a little bit out of my scope necessarily, is funding masters in school counseling or the state equivalent as an idea. But I'll go a little bit into the more American atheist perspective. just looking into this a little bit, I would just like to say that it's clearly proselytization to allow these chaplains in. I know counselors need help. I know we have a teacher shortage. We have a shortage in several fields, but allowing counselors in public schools is just not the way to do that. And I think that's all I have. I think it's pretty obvious.
Okay, any questions for the witness? Okay, well, here, let's start with Senator Gallion, and then we'll go to Senator Carrozza after that.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. So my understanding of the bill, it's voluntary, so it's not forced on anybody, and it was talked about by the panel. Another thing that's voluntary in the schools is, you know, I was looking up, my wife was a member. They have a thing called Fellowship of Christian Athletes that is led by students really in the schools. Do you think that's a violation of that separation that you mentioned?
Is this just like a club like for like just kids, or for the Christian students rather?
It's for students who are also athletes that are looking to do things. I mean, we hear a lot of athletes today. I mean, whether it's CJ Stroud, Lamar Jackson at the professional level professing their faith, but why shouldn't folks at the school level be able to do that if it's not forced on anybody?
Yeah, I think they should be allowed to do that in separate clubs, like after school club, other things. I think I would suggest that if parents would like their kids to be engaging with chaplains, including in prayer in schools, they should go to private religious schools rather than public schools.
Okay, Senator Carrozza.
I think the senator covered my questions.
Did have one virtual witness. Is she in the queue? Okay, we've got, let's see if we can find her. Nelda Fink. Ms. Fink, are you in the queue here? Okay, and you've signed up unfavorable and you're on the 2-minute clock. So why don't you start?
Hi, my name is Nelda Fink. I'm from Millersville. Committee, thank you for this opportunity to keep this Senate aligned with our constitutions. This bill opens a can of constitutional worms. What is the definition of chaplain? I'll say that again. What is the definition of chaplain? Interestingly, I cannot find it in any of the statutes, but the COMAR for the correctional system has a chaplaincy, and that allows for multiple religions. I have a link to that in my written testimony. So this bill as it stands is too vague and is treading on the edges of religious freedoms, protections incorporated into the constitutions. I am a devout Christian. While I would love to see more Christianity taught in public institutions, constitutionally, we must allow for other religions as well, just like is being allowed in the correctional systems. And while many constitutionalists proclaim the federal Constitution's First Amendment was intended to be Christian religion, it does not specifically state that. And it has been argued in the Supreme Court to be applied to other religions. So just like our correctional systems allow for all faiths to be represented, to be constitutional, this bill should as well. I know many of the legislators sponsoring this bill are Christians, so I ask the question, would you allow for a satanic deity to be considered a chaplain for the purposes sought in this bill? I'm guessing the answer is no. And would it be fair to require a Christian leader to be the chaplain of someone who doesn't believe in God in the first place? I mean, would it be fair to the student? In my future glorious kingdom in heaven, this would be great, but I'm still in the flesh here on earth attempting to coexist with many others. So instead of calling it a chaplain, call the person a moral support leader, since morals seem to be lacking everywhere, even in the church. Or instead of having only one, have many to cover the many different religions. So while I would love to see this bill passed, it would be violating the Constitution, making Christianity the state's religion. I oppose this bill and request your unfavorable report. Thank you.
Any questions for Ms. Fink? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 612. We're going to next move. We're going to take Senator Brooks next, and after that, we'll do the 3 Senator Washington bills. So just in terms of sequence, but Senator Brooks, Senate Bill 638, and I see John Bratsakis, and we've also got Lauren Lamb, and also Bob Etten. I don't know if Mr. Etten's there on behalf of the mortgage bankers. Those are the 3 witnesses. So. Okay, so Senator Brooks, you can lead off on Senate Bill 638, and then we have, again, 3 witnesses, and that's the extent of the testimony.
Chair Feldman and my committee members, thank you for the opportunity to present to you Senate Bill 638. Yeah, and the Oh, for the record, I'm Ben Brooks, representing the 10th Legislative District in Baltimore County. Yeah. This bill, well, the purpose of this bill is to encourage our students to become financially literate. Currently, Maryland Public High School students are required to complete 75 hours of service learning to graduate. This bill will allow high school students to supplement their required service hours with financial literacy courses approved by the local county Board of Education starting in the 2025 and through 2026 school year. The County Board of Education will determine the weight of financial literacy courses compared to service hours. Under this legislation, Maryland Public Schools will produce well-rounded students equipped with both financial literacy skills and values of community service. Currently, 15 out of Maryland's 24 local education authorities, or better known as LEAs, do not offer financial literacy as a separate credit course. Instead, financial literacy education is embedded into loosely related subjects such as world history, economics, and government. Offering courses focused on financial literacy and incentivizing students to take them is an important step to ensuring our high schoolers enter the adult world with their best foot forward. The National Financial Capability Study, an independent organization, studied American financial literacy knowledge by interviewing individuals across the United States. In most recent study, the NFCS interviewed Maryland residents earning less than $50,000 a year. In 2009, 53% had adequate knowledge of inflation. In 2021, only 40% had adequate knowledge. In 2009, 67% had adequate knowledge of interest. In 2021, only 61% had adequate knowledge. And in 2009, 31% of the respondents overall had a high financial literacy knowledge. In 2021, only 21% had an adequate knowledge. The study also investigated the financial outcomes of Marylanders who learn financial literacy in high school. The findings are concerning. 63% spent more than their income. 22% don't have a savings account, and 41% have paid the minimum balance on a credit card. These findings demonstrate the shortcoming of embedded financial literacy education and the need for dedicated financial literacy courses. Our students are being taught financial literacy, but they are not being financially literate. Under this bill, an eligible financial literacy course can be offered at a high school, by an institution of higher education, or by an organization approved by the county board. While counties have the option to establish new financial literacy courses, this bill will allow them to take advantage of already existing financial literacy courses and programs. In exchange for taking these courses, the students will earn hours toward their community service hours, which is a graduation requirement. As you know, Maryland has some of the strongest community colleges in the nation. This bill has the added benefit of introducing high school students to a higher education environment. If a student takes a financial literacy course at a community college, a very financially literate decision, they may then choose to take advantage of a dual enrollment program offered through many Maryland counties to continue their college studies. Financial literacy is equally as important as, and if not more so, than other electives offered by public schools and warrants the same focus on other subjects received. Allowing students alternatives in choosing their educational produces a more active learners. By incentivizing students to substitute their service hours for financial literacy courses, we can boost students' engagement with their education. We can make our students book smart, but if they are not also money smart, we have failed to properly equip them with the necessary life skills. For these reasons, I request a favorable report.
Okay, let's go to our two witnesses and we'll take
Okay,
questions.
John.
Sir, tell us your name, and again, you're gonna be on the 2-minute clock, each of you.
Good morning, Chairman Feldman and members of the committee. My name is John Bratsakis, and I am the President and CEO of the Maryland and DC Credit Union Association. And we represent 70 credit unions and who serve 1.9 million Maryland consumers. We strongly support this bill as it's a first step in helping young people have the necessary tools and training to help them navigate their financial complexities of living on their own. In fact, MSDE's 2021 Financial Literacy Report clearly states that today more than ever before, graduates must be financially literate in order to prepare themselves for college, careers, and responsible living. Unfortunately, Maryland ranks 48th out of 50 states in average debt carried by residents. The data from this report also shows that, unsurprisingly, as we get older, our debts typically grow. This makes it even more important to have good foundational understanding of financial literacy. Credit unions throughout the state engage in various financial literacy programs such as financial reality fairs, and these in-person simulation events prepare high schoolers for financially successful futures by learning firsthand what it's like to live within their own means. Students choose a career. They have their monthly salary. They get their student debt, and they visit food, clothing, transportation, and others in an attempt to get them to understand what they will be spending on a regular basis. We would request that a favorable review from the committee and that Senate Bill 638 will take an important first step in encouraging and supporting students for choice to gain critical life skills before graduating high school. Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Lamb.
Hello, members of the committee. My name is Lauren Lamb. I'm here on behalf of the Maryland State Education Association, which represents 75,000 educators across the state. We recognize the importance of educating students on financial literacy as we prepare them for the future. In each of Maryland's counties, schools follow financial literacy standards as part of various courses and sometimes standalone courses. But for students who might want additional financial literacy education, this bill provides a creative incentive by offering students service hours for taking a dual enrollment course at an institution of higher education. We appreciate this innovative approach to promoting financial literacy education. This bill does not issue mandates on how schools should structure their courses or how educators should teach, approaches that we have long been concerned about. It simply designates financial literacy as an important use of students' time by offering service hours. We urge you to support Senate Bill 638. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions, Senator Brooks of the panel? I see Senator Lewis Young.
Thank you. I'm going to direct my question to my good friend, Senator Brooks. Don't you think that this is somewhat of a bigger issue? I saw the letter of unfavorable testimony. It looks very familiar. We've seen it before. Senator Kramer saw it. I saw it. So 50% of public school funding comes to the state, but we're told over and over again that we shouldn't have any say whatsoever on curriculum. Do you think maybe we can have conversations to see if there's some kind of a pathway to establish a few priorities on curriculum, such as financial literacy?
Yeah. Thanks for the question, Senator. And I would agree. You know, I don't care what career path you take. You know, you're going to have to deal with finances. And if we're educators, you know, then why are we not educating our students, you know, in towards something that we know that they're going to have to deal with? Yeah. You know, and of course, as legislators, we don't want to set curriculum.
Right.
Yeah. But at the same time, if there are things that we can encourage, you know, then we should. And I'm proud to have MSEA up here supporting this bill. So
okay.
Thank you.
Thanks very much.
Yes.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 638. Thank you, folks. We're gonna next go to the three Senator Washington bills. Senator, do you want to start? There's two that you are the lone witness, so why don't we start with those two? Senate Bill 698. We'll start with Senate Bill 698.
Do we have a PowerPoint for this first one? How do we do that?
Got our crack whip Lamoria Stanton to assist with that.
I could, Mr. Chairman, start with SB 1089. I'm also the sole.
Okay,
on
let's
that
do
one,
that. Let's start.
And that
with
one's
10
pretty straightforward.
Start with 1089 and then we'll go back to the other one. Okay.
Great. Good morning, colleagues. Senator Mary Washington asking for your favorable report on Senate Bill 1089. There are a lot of pieces of legislation looking at data privacy, and it continues to be an important issue. Because of the subject matter of our committee in education, wanted to focus just a little bit on our education policy around student privacy. So we currently have a piece of the code that protects our students, but this bill is adding school employees as well. So as students utilize more and more online services, we've seen increasing problems. And we have passed legislation to address that. School employees also utilize the same platforms as their students for online teaching, dissemination of various information. And these employees currently do not have the same protections for any data. So that's what we are doing under SB 1089. And it's focusing on educational records, names, addresses, phone numbers, social security, political, religious affiliations, all the type of political and personal information that is collected. Specifically, this bill expands the definition of operate.
Just to be clear, the bill you're talking about, we have on the screen, I think the other bill now is on here queued up just for people watching. So they're not confused.
Right.
We're currently on Senate Bill 1089 and we figured the technical problem that will be on the next bill. So Lamoria.
So it looks like we're
okay. It's just good. Proceed. We know we're not on the bill that's on the screen.
Okay.
So we're good. We're smart here.
okay. Okay. All right, then again, this one is very straightforward. The bill will help protect the rights of privacy of teachers and school administrators who should be allowed to perform their duties without fear of their data being used inappropriately. There is an amendment in that there was an omission in the original drafting that speaks a bit to engaging with that the vendors have to provide securities as well. And so I will offer those when the appropriate time. So I ask for your favorable report, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, fair report on Senate Bill 1089, which is again different than what I have on the board there. Okay, any questions for Senator Washington on Senate Bill 1089? Okay, Senator Hester.
I think this is a really important issue, Senator Washington. I was just curious, why didn't we originally cover the employees? Do you have any idea?
I don't know.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, any other questions? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 1089. And now we will go to Senate Bill 698, and we have your PowerPoint on the screen.
So colleagues, Senate Bill 698, I'm asking for your favorable report. We have a number of bills that are looking at the blueprint in general, but as you recall, we began this during this interim session, just trying to understand the overall structure of education. So this bill is intended to, I think, make some additional clarifications with regard to the scope of the authority of the AIB. And also specifically, it's focusing on the use of the term plenary authority of the AIB instead of allowing for authority over the things covered in AIB subtitle. The Legal Information Institute defines plenary authority as a power that is wide-ranging, broadly construed, and often limitless for all practical purposes. But let's start just with our organization. If you will look, the way that the state of Maryland is organized, we believe that the ultimate authority is, of course, the state, our voters. And then we have three branches of government: the legislature, the executive, and the judicial. And then under that are what we call principal executive departments, right? So this is how we organize our subject areas. And we have our principal departments. One of those is education. And then we also, beneath those, or, on the bottom, we have executive commissions and we have independent agencies. Next slide. So the state board, so when we look at the hierarchy or understanding the authority for education in our state, what we ask of the state board is that it acts under the bylaws, that it's appointed, and as you can see, it has the general powers and duties as provided under subtitle 3. And our state board has 14 members, and they're all appointed by the governor. Next slide. So then under the state board of education, we have our state Department of Education. And again, in code, it's established as a principal department of state government. Thank you. The state board is organized. And again, the state board has general powers and duties as provided in subtitle 2 of this title. Next slide. Then, of course, we have our state superintendents, right? And it's again under Maryland Code in the same section. And our superintendents are appointed and they have general powers. Next slide. And of course, we have our county boards of education. And again, our county boards also have jurisdiction over specific areas having to do with the political organization and the corporate organization of our local school systems. They exist in perpetuity and they have various responsibilities. Next slide. So that's a repeat. Next slide. Then finally, we have our county superintendents who also have general powers as listed in very specific general powers. Next slide. Now, and again, this is just some of the things that they do. And one of the things is that the responsibility of the county superintendents, they have a relationship with the state board. Next slide. Now, an independent unit of government, it's a part of the executive branch, and those are the offices at state government that we establish to have a distinct authority that is separate from the principal authority of state government. So it's just, again, about looking in our code and being consistent. And there is this statutorily distinction. And also, however, state entities, the state principal departments can provide budgetary and can give budgetary support to independent agencies, and they can receive administrative support from independent agencies. Next slide. So we created in 2021 the AIB. This committee, some folks in this committee in the legislature, and we charged the AIB with developing the comprehensive implementation plan for the blueprint. Okay, and it set forth that every unit that there are multiple units of government that had some relationship and responsibility for implementing it. And it authorizes and it encourages the AIB to work with those entities. But very specifically, it talks about the submission of an implementation plan, and that it was the role of the AIB to review that implementation plan. The board also has an authority in this particular case, it was given the authority to withhold funds if they don't have an approved implementation plan. So that is the authority, is that if they do not submit an approved implementation plan, that is the grounds for withholdal of funds. Also, a role of the board was to evaluate, and again, this is all from our law, was to evaluate the data submitted to it. So there are criteria that are set. And so there is data that is to be submitted to the board. And it has to do with specifically with components of the Blueprint for Maryland's Future that have to do with achieving the desired outcome of equal access and high quality education. Now, the board also, each year, this board is supposed to review the use of school level expenditures. And again, in code, it's very specific about reviewing school level expenditures. It's to review poverty grants and special education funding and monitor school system compliance with the Blueprint for Maryland's Future. That's next. All right, so this is the board. This board, there's a chair and there's a vice chair. And it has, in its structure, it delegates a lot of authority to the executive director, who can hire board staff, who can oversee the management of the staff, the executive director can enter into contracts and agreements. They can expend amounts up to $25,000 at their discretion. Expenditures between $25,000 and $50,000 have to be approved by a chair, and so on. So there are some instances when it is considered an emergency or they don't have time to have a meeting. The executive director is authorized to make large expenditures, but they simply have to call the chair and the chair can approve those expenditures. So next slide. So this is that we've seen this multiple times. These are our 5 pillars, and there's one pillar where, so we have 4 pillars, but there's one pillar in which the AIB is, and that has to do with governance and accountability. And so again, just to remind us, so next slide. Okay, so we have these principles of the blueprint. We know what they are, that we want to transform early education. We want to transform secondary education. We want to achieve various principles. Next slide. Now, plenary authority. So plenary authority refers to the complete and absolute power that is wide-ranging, broadly construed, and limitless. When it's granted, plenary authority means there is full discretion and decision-making power without any limitations within their authority. Plenary power refers to the complete and absolute authority granted and enables them to exercise significant control and discretion over relevant matters, which they get to deem what's relevant. Next slide. So this bill simply does 2 things. One, you go to the next slide. In the legislation, or in our code currently, there is language that talks about the AIB board not intending to usurp and abrogate other entities. I simply change it from "it is not intended to" "it may not." May not occurs in this same section somewhere, further down. So we're just making it even consistent within. So it may not. The other thing is that it was interesting that there was no mention of our state board in any of the blueprint. And I just think that, again, that had to have been an omission. So I'm adding that it may not usurp or abrogate the operational authority of the department, which would be the Department of Education, the state board, and the governor's workforce, so all of those others. It does one other thing. You do the next slide. The legislation also proposes to really clarify and be specific. There are a number, and I know this was a big, big piece of legislation, and it was transformational, and it has broad visions, but there's a lot of imprecise language. I think as we go through this process, and a number of people are observing different aspects of it, that it would be good to really clarify different roles in what we're doing. And so here I'm removing the plenary authority. As I showed you, every single other, there's no other principal department that has plenary authority. Everyone has general authorities. So it is making it this also, it has authority. So removing plenary authority. And then it's focusing the authority that is provided within the context of the blueprint. And the roles that have been highlighted throughout the blueprint is a really important role of accountability. So I'm putting that in very strongly as monitoring and evaluation of the intended outcomes of the blueprint, and that they do this through the approval of the implementation plans and other reports, that they're measuring progress towards achieving the benchmark set in the board's comprehensive implementation plan. So that gives just some real, I think, strength to the role. And then also, it also says that if there is a conflict between a decision or policy of the board and the decision or policy of another entity that's required to implement an element of the blueprint and submit an implementation plan that on that matter related to an implementation plan or report, that the board's decision and policy shall control. So maintaining what I believe was the original intent of the drafters of the blueprint was that in these areas, that it is the AIB board that should exercise authority. So that is the bill. I appreciate you allowing me to explain it, and I'm here to answer any questions.
Okay, we'll start with Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And I appreciate what the sponsor is trying to do. But I would contend that there is nothing simple about this.
Absolutely.
When we went through this process of, trying to define roles and responsibilities with the Maryland Department of Education, with the newly formed Accountability and Implementation Board. So you first have that dynamic between those two. Right. Then you have the dynamic of the counties, and then the dynamic of the local boards of education. And what's occurring right now, and like for instance, in Worcester County, there just was a meeting between the AIB and the county government and the boards of education, I think trying to sift through some very challenging issues that range from transparency to outcomes. So I see a bill like this, and all of that comes back as far as if the purpose of this is trying to work out these roles and responsibilities, and what, to me, if we're going to have that discussion in this committee, which is a priority conversation and policy, I don't see in here that that MACO has the counties have weighed in, boards of education, the superintendents, all those that are trying to live the blueprint implementation today.
Right.
So I guess my question to you, it looks like you were trying to kind of take a narrow targeted shot at, clarifying. At the same time, we have these other major organizations in addition to the Accountability and Implementation Board. So did you have any conversations with these other organizations at a leadership level?
Yeah. So I hear what you're saying, and I agree that we need a broader conversation about roles and responsibilities, et cetera. However, this is intentionally, and actually I was going to propose, since we have so many AIB bills that we do a similar gathering as we did with one of the energy bills, and we talk through some of them. But this particular bill is really, it's not that it's simple, but it is consistent with one is there's one very clear thing, is that there is nowhere in code where any entity is given plenary power. Plenary power is usually exercised, for example, of the military over a soldier. Plenary power does not exist anywhere. And so just simply getting rid of that just makes, so that first one is just, okay, then that corrects it. And I think it was a mistake for that to be in there. Secondly, the portion of may not usurp, it's actually there's parts that there are sections in the same, like in the next paragraph, where it says may not usurp. And I just think it was a drafting. It was like, is not intended to usurp. And so
your point is you've narrowed in on two issues, the plenary, I get that, and the I get that.
Right.
But you have to understand, I mean, all of us on this committee have to understand right now, they are literally working through this, and we're at a really tough point because you have you have this transparency on the spending of our education dollars. You have the education outcomes. You have different entities being held for different roles and responsibilities. So to me, I understand you wanted to keep this narrow, but it opens up how we are going to be successful in defining roles and responsibilities. So we're successful on both how we're spending our education dollars and tying that to the outcomes. And we can't do that without these other organizations involved. And that's why I asked if there was any conversation.
I have had conversations with other organizations. And so, but they don't have a role in this particular bill, which is attempting to make at least this one section consistent.
Okay, so your answer is you're separating out these kind of two narrow issues on this bill to this bigger.
It's the easiest thing. Now what we could do, we could add and say.
If I could just interject, I mean,
I know we're
go
going
on
back.
all
Okay.
afternoon here with this, and
Thank you, Mr. Chair.
I just, I
No,
just
you're right.
feel like it's Friday. I want to kind of.
You're right. We got into it a little too much.
And I would note there's no testimony from anybody on the bill.
Yes, like no one's saying anything.
Against comment.
Exactly. Just
Which
let it
is
go.
highly, highly unusual.
Yes,
So,
it is.
I mean,
think
you
that
would
yes.
acknowledge that.
I think that says something.
Okay, that said,
Just go ahead.
Senator Lewis, John.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. Thank you for bringing this bill forward. It is an issue that I have heard about from many educators. My question is, do you think that this issue could be part of the larger umbrella bill for blueprint adjustments that we heard about earlier? Or do you feel like it needs to stand alone?
I just because of the very specific definitional nature of it, it's not really addressing any policy changes or anything. I'd like it to just stand alone, but I do want to, education subcommittee, we should bring those together and have that conversation about maybe how to pick one of those as a vehicle to move forward a lot of things. Yeah.
Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, any additional questions for Senator Washington on Senate Bill 698? Okay, that concludes bill hearing on 698. We will now turn to your third bill.
Which I bring everybody together because I do talk
Yes,
to everybody.
Exactly, Senate bill, and this one actually has testimony from outside groups. Okay. Senate Bill 771, I've got Cheryl Boast. I saw Ms. Boast walk in here. Part of your sponsor panel, Lauren Lamb.
Yeah, everyone.
Dr. Carey Wright's favorable with amendment. Josh Michael also from State Board of Education, favorable with amendment. And then we do have one virtual witness, Sierra Davison. So let's take the panel that's here, that some of the folks I called. We do have one witness signed up unfavorable. So we'll take them next. So Senator Washington, why don't you explain Senate Bill 771?
Thank you, colleagues. I'll mostly leave my panel to explain the bill. You've heard from me quite a lot today. But for the record, Senator Mary Washington asking for your favorable report of SB 771, looking at initial teacher certification requirements and making some adjustments. We all know that we have a tremendous challenge with being able to enable individuals who are very competent, very good, very qualified, but the way that we currently structure our requirements keeps them from being able to become teachers. We also know that we need to, when it comes to looking at recruitment and allowing individuals to even contemplate becoming teachers, we need to make some adjustments. So we've really worked to look at both the top part as well as maintaining people that we have. And so we're really looking at the current research that suggests that teacher certifications exams don't predict teacher effectiveness. And we've also seen that in a number of other sections. So this bill is designed to reduce the roadblocks by creating more options and more pathways that allow aspiring educators to come and to teach and be a part of our public school system and not really be limited to the current structures. Now, you see everyone's together and there are some suggested amendments, and there's maybe one or two areas where there's still some discussion that needs to continue, and we will work those out. You'll now hear from the panel.
Okay, Ms. Bose, do you want to lead off, and we'll end up Dr. Wright at the end. So we'll just start with you.
Sure. Thank you, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Cheryl Bost. I'm a 4th and 5th grade teacher from Baltimore County, proudly serving as the president for the Maryland State Education Association, representing over 75,000 educators across the state. As you heard Senator Washington talk, we're trying to find pathways for more educators, more diverse educators to come into our profession as we expand our CTE opportunities, as we're just looking, because we're in a historic educator shortage. I want to start with what this bill doesn't do. This bill doesn't weaken our profession. It's balancing the high standards of our profession and opening up pathways. This bill does not remove all testing to come into the profession. It's a reduction, but not an elimination. This bill provides multiple pathways that candidates can choose to take, but will have to take one of the pathways to be considered a certificated educator. So one of those pathways is to pass the tests that are out there. Those are the praxis tests, and if you're a good test taker, you can go forward and pass those assessments. You will have a bachelor's degree and then take those. The other is to have a 3.0 GPA in your last degree and pass a core subject test. So it's just a reduction of the one test and having a 3.0 GPA. That's currently in regulation. We want to continue that and put it into statute. Another is to take a portfolio assessment, as many of our colleges do, EdTPA or a similar, and take a content assessment. And the last choice is to go through a rigorous induction program, come in with a bachelor's degree, go through a rigorous induction program, be seen as you're doing a great job by an administrator or the school system, and take a content subject assessment, making sure people are really grounded in that content. So these are opening up pathways that we believe find that balance between a professional standards and opening up the door to more people to come in. Thank you.
Okay, Slam, you're going to testify as well. It's on the 2-minute clock.
Hello, I'm Lauren Lamb from the Maryland State Education Association. I'm here to say me too in support of the bill and assist in answering any questions.
Okay, great. Sir?
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman, members of the committee. My name is Josh Michael. I serve as Vice President of the State Board of Education, and here today to express the board's support of Senate Bill 771 with amendments. I'm also pleased to be joined by our State Superintendent, Dr. Carrie Wright, who's going to provide some more detail. We have a proposed framework for amendments that was developed after significant collaboration with the AIB this week, and they are in agreement with the concepts in this framework. We weren't done by 6 o'clock last night, so we do have hard copies. If if they are able to be distributed.
Sure. Here,
Excellent.
why don't we do that?
We stand hand in hand with the AIB in implementing the blueprint with fidelity. And we're aligned on the end goals as it relates to Senate Bill 771, building and maintaining a high quality, highly diverse, and effective educator workforce. The board and MSDE feel strongly that making course corrections on initial teacher certification now are critical for yielding the results that we must realize within the next 2 years. We thank the sponsors and advocates for their work to bring this bill forward. MSDE supports use of multiple measures for meeting standards, given that each measure indicates that a standard has been met. In this case, we support the use of multiple measures for teacher candidates without lowering or removing standards. We also believe that this is a critical juncture to embed the Interstate Compact as a critical step for maintaining our pipeline of out-of-state teachers that we too much rely on. We're offering amendments here, and we request additional time to workshop this bill with relevant stakeholders after the hearing. Thank you.
Okay, Dr. Wright.
Thank you. I guess it's good afternoon. I am Carrie Wright, as I said before, the interim state superintendent of schools in Maryland. MSDE is dedicated to ensuring that Maryland students have access to highly qualified and diverse teacher workforce. In alignment with the blueprint for Maryland's future Pillar 2, which focuses on high quality and diverse teachers and leaders, MSDE's strategic plan provides a map for elevating the stature of the teaching profession by intentionally working to attract, recruit, and retain a highly qualified and diverse workforce, setting rigorous standards for educator preparation programs and induction, and implementing a career ladder focused on the development and growth opportunities for all educators. MSDE supports the use of multiple measures for teacher candidates to demonstrate the knowledge and skills required of a high-quality workforce without lowering or removing standards, and are therefore supportive of what we believe to be the fundamental intent of Senate Bill 771. We believe multiple measures allow prospective teachers to play to their strengths in meeting the standards. As introduced, MSDE has concerns with Senate Bill 771 merging the competencies associated with basic knowledge, such as reading, writing, and math, and pedagogy. Measures that demonstrate basic knowledge should not be conflated with measures that demonstrate teaching ability. Additionally, Senate Bill 771 amends the initial certification requirements to remove the need to demonstrate the skills required to provide evidence-based reading instruction. Ensuring that every teacher in Maryland is proficient in teaching reading using evidence-based instructional strategies aligned with the science of reading is a top priority for the department and the state board. MSDE has partnered with the Accountability and Implementation Board on proposed amendments to Senate Bill 771 and have developed a framework that you now have in your hands for these recommended changes for your consideration. Thank you so much.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Senator Washington or for panelists? Senator Carozza.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'll be brief. And I want to thank the sponsor for the multiple pathways. It's something I've consistently heard in the field from the teachers. And I think my question is more directed to Dr. Wright. And I thank you for personally being here today and for your accessibility to our superintendents. My question is, this bill is focused on multiple pathways for initial teaching certification. What I've also heard from our teachers in the field is that the need for flexibility as on the national certification requirement with the tied to their salary increases that it's been brought to my attention that some of the teachers that on their own had gone and pursued at their own expense and time went and pursued masters and PhDs and have this, additional training that those pathways count the way you might count the national certification for tying it to the salary increases. So I know that where we're focused on this bill, but it's something that I've picked up in the field and perhaps I wanted Dr. Wright and perhaps, Ms. Bost, if you wanted to comment as well, but I felt obligated to bring that up because I thought those teachers deserve some recognition for what they've done on their own to pursue their higher education.
And to be honest with you, I'm not familiar. I don't know the conversation that took place prior to this requirement. So can I yield to my vice
Sure.
president to respond to that?
Sure.
Thank you.
So I think you raised something that we are also hearing in the field. I think the intent of the blueprint is clear. One of the things that we've been wrestling from at a policy perspective is that despite the best of intents, master's degrees and PhDs, of which I have both, right, don't actually tie to student learning outcomes. And so part of the design of Pillar 2 is to get closer to seeing when we provide components. When we are asking teachers to do additional work, that be better aligned with requirements that improve teacher practice. With that said, it is definitely something that we're wanting to have our ear to the ground and be thinking about the career ladder to ensure that the incentives are right. So that's something that we are wanting to have conversations on as we move through.
And I think there has to be a recognition, and I understand maybe moving forward, but to me, you may have a situation where it would appear inequitable.
And I would just encourage you to look at Senate Bill 545. Senator Elfreth has put forth a bill to expand those opportunities for National Board to look at doctors and masters, to not make the National Board the only indicator. So it's Senate Bill 545.
So consistent of some other pathways as we're doing with this bill, but this bill is focused on initial teacher.
Yes.
Thank you. And thank you for the bill.
Okay. Sure, go on.
General say to the senator, you're seeing like pieces, but there have been discussions and that these are just how we're going to proceed with it. There's so many things that are going to be addressed. So just wanted to let you know that they're very aware of that. And with regard to the other issue that we've heard on the ground, that there's an amendment that's looking that in some cases, it's going to clarify that out-of-state teachers who have, had years and years of experience, we're not going to require that they go and get have to take tests that are currently required in order to teach in our schools. So there will be changes that will take effect this year, I hope. Thank you.
Any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do actually have one virtual witness, Sierra Davison. It's Ms. Davison, who has signed up straight favorable. Let's get her in. And then we have one witness signed up unfavorable. Then we'll go to Senator King after that. Okay, Ms. Davison, you are signed up favorable and you're on the 2-minute clock.
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Hello, everyone. I'm Sierra Davison, and I'm graduating in May from Frostburg State University with a bachelor's degree in elementary middle education with a focus in mathematics. 5 days ago, I took my final praxis exam, and I had to drive an hour away, spend 3 hours at a testing center, and spend my last $150 on the exam and gas. On the way back to my home school, my car broke down, and I do not have the funds nor the time to work more hours outside my internship than I already do to fix my vehicle. 3 days ago, my father had surgery and I have yet to be home with him because I took the time to study for this praxis. In just 90 days, I will be walking across the stage with my cohort. In just 90 days, 35 future educators must be sure to have registered, taken, and passed a minimum of 6 praxis exams on top of our final student teaching and completing Ed TPA. In 70 days, 35 student interns will have put in a minimum of 1,400 hours of their time unpaid doing what they love. And in 70 days, 35 students will be worried about graduation requirements, jobs, student loan debt, and a million other things. The first thing on our minds is, did we complete and pass everything necessary to earn our state certification? And the first question on our minds is, did we do enough? In 3 days, my cohort will begin to interview with counties across the state in hopes of finding an open position. Some of us will interview knowing we cannot accept positions offered to us due to not having taken all required praxis exams. These exams are costly and time-consuming. These exams are repetitive. I urge you to vote favorably towards this bill and allow other aspiring educators like myself to achieve the dream of teaching tomorrow's leaders. We want to give our time and money to our students, not to exams that do not showcase our teaching abilities and require rote memorization. In such a necessary profession facing a terrible shortage, please help us make teaching more accessible and support Senate Bill 771. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Any questions for Ms. Davison? Okay, seeing none, which leaves us with one unfavorable. We've got Ann Eustace. You are signed up unfavorable and you're going to be on the 2-minute clock, okay?
Good afternoon, honorable senators. Thanks for this opportunity to express my opposition to the bill. My name is Ann Eustace, and I'm a longtime resident in Old Ellicott City, where I've been proud to help Senator Hester with many and various initiatives. But I'm here today to express my own individual beliefs. They are informed, however, by 34 years in Maryland public education, both at the P-12 level and at the undergraduate and graduate teacher preparation levels, where I serve as a clinical faculty member. Over my 24 years in higher ed, I've supervised candidates in many counties and in the city almost daily. The bill before you, to me, seems to be one of slamming some doors shut before they have even been fully opened. You see, for the last 5 years, education preparation programs in Maryland have been preparing for this spring of 24, right now, when we thought we would be engaging with MSDE in thoughtful and data-driven score setting processes to decide on these initial thresholds for national performance-based assessments. Because I've witnessed firsthand the value and import of using these. Prior to the last years, teacher candidates proved their readiness for a classroom by crafting a scrapbook of sorts, often a huge notebook to show what they'd been up to while they were student teaching. They were often pretty, although not demonstrative of what the intern or student teacher actually knew or could do. However, with nationally scored, reliable, and valid assessments, we have a much better way to determine candidate readiness for their own classroom. Because numerous videos are part of this requirement, it isn't possible to hide your own instructional capabilities. The other measures in the assessment include planning and assessing the P-12 learners, but they use real student work samples to do this. The purpose behind these assessments has always been to serve as an equity lever, assuring that all students had a teacher who was both ready and growing. The legislation is not going to solve the problem before us. To me, it seems short-sighted and premature. Governor Moore suggests that no one should be left behind, but having inadequately prepared teachers, I believe, would do just that. Thank you.
Okay.
I had a lot more, sorry.
Okay. Any questions for the witness? Okay, seeing none, that concludes bill hearing on Senate Bill 771, which brings us to Senator King, who has the final two bills today on the calendar. We're going to start with Senate Bill 882. And you do have some witnesses you've designated as your sponsor panel. I've got Lacey Eidman, Laura Wheeldryer. There are some other witnesses who've signed up favorable. If you don't mind, I could bring them up too.
Absolutely.
Okay, I've got Shana Cook from State Department of Education, Ellie Cowan, representing State Child Care Association, and Joshua Michael from the State Board of Education. So why don't we bring all of the, and then there is, on top of that, there is one virtual witness that we can pick up after this panel. Okay, so Senator King, we're in Senate Bill 882.
Mr. Chairman. I have this bill and I have another bill after that. I've left my subcommittee in the very capable hands of Senator Benson. And so I am going to do this bill and then introduce the next bill, and then I'm going to have to go back up to the subcommittee.
Okay, that works. So why
Thank
don't you
you.
start on first with 882.
Okay, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee, our state and our nation depend on childcare to keep parents earning, children learning, and our economy churning. To achieve these essential goals, childcare programs must be accessible, affordable, and of high quality. These three factors are intertwined, but access is arguably the most fundamental need. Access to childcare is threatened when the supply of affordable, high-quality programs is diminished or inequitably distributed. And access has been threatened. The number of family childcare programs in Maryland has declined precipitously over the past 2 decades, from approximately 12,500 in 1996 to 4,300 in 2023, a trend that's mirrored nationally. Licensed family child care programs are distinct from child care centers and are typically operated by women in their homes caring for up to 8 children. These programs are a critical component of the overall supply of child care and a necessary or preferable option for many parents due to cost, geographic proximity, hours of availability, and cultural or linguistic concerns. In 2021, the legislature unanimously passed a pilot program to help address acute shortages of family child care programs in underserved communities in our state. This pilot program was based on an effort in Montgomery County to increase the supply of licensed family child care programs and ensure the sustainability of new and existing ones. My panel today will tell you more, but the big news is that the outcomes and results we have to share with you today are pretty impressive. This is one of the ways good public policy is supposed to work. We find a promising idea, we pilot it, we collect and evaluate results, and when the results warrant, we build on that success. And that's what Senate Bill 882 will do. It will take the time-limited and low-cost pilot program created in 2021 and make it permanent so we can continue the program's success in increasing the supply of licensed family child care programs in Maryland. And I ask for a favorable report.
Okay, before we go to the next bill, any questions, Senator King, just on Senate Bill 882? Okay, seeing none. Senator King, why don't you now go to 738 and present that, and then if people have a couple of questions before you go
Okay.
back.
All right.
Okay, so why don't you go to Senate Bill 738, and then we'll come back to your panel for the other bill.
Thank you so much. I appreciate it, Mr. Chairman. Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, there are some bills that I just wish were not necessary, and this is one of them. But unfortunately, we are seeing a rise in our state and our country of challenges aimed to remove books from our library shelves and restrict choices on what is publicly available for our residents to read. Senate Bill 738, the Freedom to Read Act, will do several things. First, it will establish in law a set of state standards for libraries. Next, it will direct all public libraries, school libraries, or resource centers to adopt and follow a written policy consistent with these state standards. It then protects our school and public library workers by preventing punitive actions being taken against them for their adherence to the state standard for libraries. And finally, it safeguards Maryland's public library collections from intentional attempts to remove or damage materials by increasing fines for offenders. Mr. Chairman, I could go on and on about the importance of this legislation, but I think this committee is better served by hearing from my panel, who will be before you, who are in the front line of protecting our libraries, and I ask for a favorable report.
Okay, so before we send you back to B&T, I want to take a couple questions, maybe from Senator Simon Aaron, then
Okay.
we'll send you back to B&T.
Welcome to our committee. I
Thank
have to
you.
admit, this is unusual. I've never had it where we start a bill and you have a panel up there with childcare and we're going to talk about
I
another
know,
bill.
I know. It's just a crazy Friday.
But we'll try. I have a lot of questions, so if you all can just sit still. First, so the scope of this bill deals with public libraries, but also school libraries, correct?
Correct.
And they're different, right? I mean, typically you bring a young child to a public library and the parents with the child, but in a school setting, the parent's usually not there.
No, usually the teacher is with them.
Exactly, right. So the parent's not there. I'm just going to focus on the school side on this. And let me say up front, I certainly appreciate our librarians and all the work they do, and I love libraries. But I've been getting a lot of correspondence on this. And so I did a little research because I wasn't up on all the processes and all that. So what I found, if you can confirm for me, so basically there is a review process to include a book into a library. The libraries perform a review, and there's a couple reviews with that. And then they decide if it should be included in the library. And then there's a potential appeal process if the parents want to appeal it. And then it's revisited by a couple people, and eventually they make the determination. Is that correct? Is that how you understand it?
I've got a school librarian here that's going to give you an answer.
Well, you know what, because that's the next bill, right?
Right.
So
Very confusing.
here's what I might propose before, okay. I think this will get a little awkward.
You know,
We're gonna have people from another
It
panel.
might be a good idea
Yeah.
to ask the actual librarian when she gets up here to
Okay,
testify when that.
Why don't
book
we
comes
get
out.
to that next hearing, and then Sarah King, if you actually finish some of the work over there, that bill looked like there were a lot of witnesses. Maybe you can pop back in here
Okay.
for that second bill. I don't want to keep you. I know you've got, so why don't we do that? Let's defer some of these questions for the second bill, and then We'll have some witnesses.
Thank
and then
you.
maybe
I'm
we can pop
sorry
up.
to confuse
No,
everything
it's
this
okay.
afternoon.
I just don't want to make this more confusing than necessary.
Yes.
So,
Thank you.
so let's go back to where we were on Senate Bill 738 and I'm sorry, on Senate Bill 882. And we're going to go down the witnesses. Everybody's going to be on a 2-minute clock here. So who wants to lead off? Okay, again, we're back on Senate Bill 882 now. Okay.
Okay. Thank you so much. Hi, I'm Laura Wheeldryer. I'm the Executive Director of Maryland Family Network. In case you don't know, Maryland Family Network is a statewide nonprofit organization, and we're a children's advocacy organization, but we also do a lot of direct service to children and families, including we oversee the Maryland Child Care Resource Center Network. And that is where GoFCC was born. The bill that we are here to talk to you about today actually got started in the Child Care Resource Center in Montgomery County. And we are so proud of the path that this program has taken from a local jurisdiction to a statewide pilot. And now we're back before you today to turn this into a permanent part of the child care workforce development landscape in Maryland. So thank you. I'm really just here to say, go FCC, and answer any questions you might have. And I'm going to hand things over to Lacey Eidman, who helps run this program.
Okay, Ms. Eidman, you're next up. And again, you're on the 2-minute clock.
Thank you. So my name's Lacey Eidman. I'm the director of the Child Care Resource Centers where this program lives. So when it was launched in Montgomery County, it was quickly apparent that this was going to have a profound impact on the state. This expanded statewide initiative is exactly what the name implies. It is a series of pathways that are providing opportunities to families and children to access high-quality childcare in their communities. It is opportunities for women to own and operate their own small business. It is opportunities to support childcare programs in communities which have been historically marginalized and underserved. It's opportunities to address childcare deserts, and it's opportunities to counter the rising number of programs which are closing. In just 18 short months, our CCRCs operating this have implemented training and coaching, which is reducing the amount of time it takes to obtain the family child care license from 12 months to 5 months. CCRCs are providing the necessary resources and supports at no charge, all but eliminating financial entry barriers. The coaches are supporting their cohorts of almost all women with building the knowledge and skills to open quality educational childcare settings, which are built on a firm business foundation. So to give you the numbers, from January 2023 to January 2024, we have opened 101 new programs, resulting in 796 new childcare slots. We have 33 people who have submitted their paperwork and are just waiting for a response. And we have 138 who are actively engaged with a coach and working their way through the program. GoFCC is changing the early care and education landscape by ensuring that underserved communities have access to high quality care. It is supporting women, many of whom represent racial minorities in Maryland, with accessing resources and supports to open their own business. It is ensuring that all children in Maryland are able to spend their first 5 years in settings which support their development and well-being. As one of our graduates said, I don't think I would have followed through with the licensing process if it wasn't for GoFCC. And I definitely wouldn't have been prepared for the business aspects. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Let's go next.
Good afternoon again. Josh Michael with the Vice President of the State Board of Education here today to underscore the State Board's support for Senate Bill 882. I want to thank Senator King for bringing this bill forward. I'm pleased to be joined a couple down by Dr. Cook, who is our Assistant State Superintendent for Early Childhood, who's going to provide some more specifics on the success of GoFCC. This program is a critical lever for our work in improving access and for childcare, particularly in communities where there is the most need. The State Board and MSD are hopeful to continue partnering with the General Assembly to build and expand childcare infrastructure in our state through GoFCC, and we ask that the committee provide a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, ma'am.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. I'm Dr. Shana Cook, Assistant State Superintendent of the Division of Early Childhood at the Maryland State Department of Education. And I'm here on behalf of the department to offer support for SB 882. And I also want to thank Senator King for bringing this bill forward. The COVID-19 pandemic exacerbated the reduction of licensed and registered childcare programs in the state of Maryland and across the country. Growing opportunities for childcare, for family childcare, is a unique program which provides intense and targeted training, coaching, and resources to support interested individuals in opening family childcare businesses. The goal of the GoFCC program is to increase the supply and ensure the sustainability of family childcare providers in areas with above average rates of poverty and unemployment. GoFCC guides potential providers through the licensing and registration process while supporting them in building strong business foundations and high-quality childcare programs. Participation is free and includes all the required training, provides access to knowledgeable coaches, and shares a variety of resources which will support the opening of a childcare business. You already heard from other panelists, this pilot program has achieved many promising outcomes. On behalf of the Maryland State Department of Education, we ask that the committee provide a favorable report on SB 882 because we know that it will have an impact for children and families by continuing to increase the supply of quality family childcare programs across the state. Thank you.
Okay, why don't you pass that down?
Thank you.
Tell us who you are.
Hi, I'm Ellie Cowan, on behalf of the Maryland State Child Care Association. Am here to offer our support of SB 882. Childcare providers are the backbone of the economy, and this bill recognizes the amazing success of the GoFCC program and will ensure Maryland continues to support access to childcare for working families. Thank you to my colleagues on the panel for doing such a great job of explaining why this bill is essential. So I will just say me too.
Okay, why don't we pick up, we do have one virtual witness, Mr. Hudson. We see you there, Mr. Hudson. You've got 2 minutes and you're again signed up favorable. And then after that, we'll take any questions. Okay, Mr. Hudson, it's all yours.
Thank you. Thank you, Chairman Feldman, members of the committee. Again, my name is Bill Hudson. I'm the Executive Director for the Family Child Care Alliance of Maryland, also the Project Manager for the Aspire Pre-K program. What is also relevant, I think, here in this conversation is I'm the former Chief Executive Officer for the National Association for Family Child Care. You have my written testimony, so I'll be brief. For my time at NEFC or the National Association, I can tell you Maryland has created an innovative project that projects similar to it across the nation have had real impact in terms of reversing the decline in family child care providers across the state. So on that point alone, I think it's an exciting project. For the Alliance, we're excited about continuation of GoFCC because we see marrying the two programs of GoFCC and our own recently created apprenticeship for family child care providers as a way to finally create a defined career track for family child care providers in Maryland for the first time ever. So we're deeply in favor of the bill, and we hope you go to a favorable report. Thank you for the time.
Okay, any questions for any of the witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes. Okay, I'm sorry, Senator Carozza.
Mr. Chair, I promise it'll be quick. First of all, wanted to thank Senator King for this legislation, and I wanted to thank the family child care providers. Our constituents depend on your, these services and the fact that, how they're set up and the care that you provide to these children. My question is, I was looking at Senator King's testimony, and it said that the participation on the Eastern Shore was 62, and I think maybe the director from MSDE or one of the association, if you could provide me a breakdown on the shore, that would be very helpful.
Yes, we have it.
Okay. Thank you.
Yep. What I can tell you, and my colleague is probably I just need my phone, I can give you, or we can email it
That's
to
fine.
you later.
That's
But
fine.
what I
offline.
can tell you is that 22 of the 23 programs that were opened on the 8 Eastern Shore counties recently were a result of this program.
Okay, that's great. Thank you.
But yeah, we'll get you the breakdown by county for everyone.
Okay, any additional questions for the panel for our virtual witness? Seeing none, that concludes the hearing on Senate Bill 882, which brings us to our final bill of the day, Senate Bill 738. And just for the committee's benefit. When we're done with this bill, we'll take a break before we do any voting. And I did order pizza. So to the extent you like pizza, it'll be the back room, but some kind of lunch break of sorts before we do our voting. But this is our last bill. And so Senator King already presented the bill. I'm going to call up her sponsor panelists, Jacob Gerdig, Sonia Alcantara, Antoine, Irene Padilla, and Mary Bacon. Apologize. I think those are the four that the Senator has designated. There are other witnesses, but not sure if that's consistent with what you guys want. Is there anybody else you want to have up here? Or?
Senator, if we may bring one other person up.
Yes. Sure, just bring them up. Okay, that's fine. Okay, whoever wants to lead off, again, we're on Senate Bill 738 and everybody's going to be on a 2-minute clock and start by telling us who you are. So why don't you start?
Well, I was going to say good morning, but good afternoon. Chairperson Feldman and members of the committee. I'm Irene Padilla, the Maryland State Librarian, and I'm honored to testify today in support of Senate Bill 738. The Freedom to Read Act is critical to the future of Maryland libraries and the communities they serve. As state librarian, I have conversations every day with dedicated librarians across the state. Unfortunately, libraries today are facing a growing number of attacks from book ban attempts and threats to politically motivated policy and personnel changes. The Freedom to Read Act requires the State Library Board and the state librarian to ensure Maryland standards for libraries, which emphasize access for all people, are core components of every library's collection development policy, and that the principles and processes for maintaining responsible library collections are adhered to. Receipt of state funding for a public library receiving state aid is contingent on each Board of Library Trustees adopting a written policy that is consistent with the state standards for libraries and conducting the operation of the library in a manner consistent with the written policy. The Freedom to Read Act provides Maryland's libraries with much needed protections in an increasingly volatile time. Librarians are being threatened. Their personal information has been shared online. Library systems are reporting an increase in security needs and mental health services for staff. While Maryland hasn't received the same volume of challenges as some other states, we are experiencing the same issues, and these issues continue to grow. The Freedom to Read Act will protect Maryland libraries, librarians, and intellectual freedom for generations to come. Thank you for your time and your continued support of libraries throughout the state.
Okay, who wants to go next?
Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Sonia Alcantara Antoine. I am the Chief Executive Officer of Baltimore County Public Library. I'm also the President of the Public Library Association, which serves 9,000 members in public libraries across the U.S. and Canada. I'm speaking today in support of SB 738. Public libraries serve diverse communities and provide access to a broad range of materials from many voices and perspectives. Libraries have trained staff who carefully and thoughtfully curate collections for their communities based on well-established professional standards. Reading and unfettered access to books and materials foster learning and critical thinking, which are essential for an informed citizenry in a healthy and thriving democracy. Libraries don't tell people how to think. Instead, libraries provide access to a marketplace of ideas and information so that people can think for themselves. Recently, however, Marylanders' right to read has been threatened, and there are efforts within our own state to undermine librarians for upholding the right to read. Data from Maryland State Library shows that the number of formal book challenges in public libraries has increased 133% between 2019 and 2023. This is mirrored nationwide, where in the first 9 months of 2023, 49% of all book challenges were aimed at public libraries, a dramatic increase from 16% the year prior. These are attempts to dictate what books the majority may find in our libraries based on the personal biases and beliefs of a vocal minority. And yet, data shows that 71% of voters nationwide oppose efforts to remove books from public libraries. Attempts to censor books are assaults on our American democracy, and are fundamentally unpatriotic. Free people read freely. Public libraries serve the public good by providing a wealth of resources and services that strengthen individuals and families and uplift communities. Our diverse collections suit many reading levels and interests. The freedom to read for all Marylanders and the work we do at public libraries must be protected. I urge a favorable report on SB 738. Thank you.
Okay, who wants to go next?
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and committee members. My name is Jacob Girding, and I am on the Executive Board of the Maryland Association of School Librarians. I am also an elementary school librarian in Charles County, Maryland. Thank you for the opportunity today to testify in support of SB 738, also known as the Freedom to Read Bill. This bill is an important milestone in the nationwide fight against censorship in both public and school libraries. The Freedom to Read Act will establish a foundation for school librarians to perform their essential work without fear of harassment or retribution, and allows our libraries to be the hub of a vibrant, inclusive learning environment. In the last 2 years, we have watched as a politically motivated movement has repeatedly attempted, sometimes successfully, to remove books from the shelves of school libraries. Some of us thought this would never happen here in Maryland until it did. Efforts at censoring and restricting access to a high-quality school library collection prevent school librarians from fulfilling a key duty: creating a robust, up-to-date collection that meets the needs of our students and the community. We take our responsibilities seriously. A recent survey of Maryland librarians conducted by the Maryland Association of School Librarians on book challenges and censorship in their districts revealed that book challenges have become a statewide epidemic, and although we take our commitment of selecting and evaluating titles for our school and library collections seriously, many librarians are fearful of job security and retribution for having diverse select collections, and soft censorship is taking place. Soft censorship is just as detrimental to the intellectual freedom of the school community as is book banning and unconstitutional censorship. It is said that books in a school library collection should reflect the student community like a mirror. At the same time, it should be a window through which students may learn about the wide and diverse world. Parents may, of course, decide what learning opportunities they wish their child to experience, but no one person or group should decide the learning and reading experience for all students. This act will reassert the Constitution.
If you could come to closure.
Constitutional principles that materials are intended to be inclusive of all individuals. Thank you.
Thank you, sir. Okay.
Thank you, Chairman Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Jamie Watson, and I am the Collection Development Manager at Baltimore County Public Library, and I'm here today to speak in favor of SB 738. I have nearly 30 years of public library experience in Ohio and Maryland, including at Enoch Pratt Free Library, Harford County Public Library, and currently Baltimore County. At each of these institutions, a collection development policy, such as is required in SB 738, was a backbone of the library selection process. Each system's administration and their library board has the ability to create their own policy that meets the needs and interests of their community. Collection development librarians follow these policies every day. We must know about publishing trends, about community demographics, about childhood and teen development. We curate a library collection that serves all of our residents, and each of these residents have the opportunity to decide which library books are for them, and they are the only ones who can decide that. Personally, I don't like sad animal stories or super sweet romances. So that's my choice. But I purchased those books for the library collection, and each individual should have this ability to determine what to read and what to leave on the shelf for others. And SB 738 assures that the expertise of librarians is honored, and the interest of the public to choose their reading material is also honored. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Feldman and members of this committee. My name is Mary Bicon, and I am here representing the citizens from Maryland Libraries. Recognizing the importance of our public libraries to the over 3 million card-carrying Maryland library users, that's public library cards, CML is a strong statewide network of individuals and organizations who value and advocate for Maryland libraries of all types. I have my colleagues here that will tell you about how they carefully select and maintain their collections. So I won't go into that, but on any given day in this state, in any library, a child or a young adult can go into that library and find something to read that speaks to their culture, their experience, and some of the life challenges they are facing, helping them to understand they are not alone. Now, I'm an old retired public country librarian, but I read my history. And we stopped a few weeks ago to acknowledge International Holocaust Day. Well, respectfully, I'd like to state a benchmark in that terrible era, and that is May 1933. In cities and towns all across Germany, in public and academic and school libraries, tens of thousands of books were pulled off shelves, thrown into the street, and torched. Why? Because they did not agree with German values. Yes, they were books by dissenters and Jewish authors, but they were also books by people like, Shakespeare, Dostoevsky, Steinbeck. Don't let this happen in Maryland, please. SB 738 protects First Amendment rights and the right of every parent and child to select what they wish to read. Let the parents decide what children should read, not the interest groups who may have a political axe to grind. Thank you for you have my complete written testimony, and you have free time between 2 and 3 in the morning. So go ahead and at your leisure, take a look at it. Thank you, sir.
Open it up to questions for this panel. Apologize. Yeah, let's start with Senator Gallion and then.
Mr. Chair, are there, I'm just curious, my question's along probably the same lines as his.
Sure.
Or more tailored to the elementary school libraries. Would another panel be more
Senator King's
correct to answer those? Or, I mean, this is mostly public libraries, correct, this panel?
I'm an elementary school librarian.
Okay, well, that's great.
Okay, so
I can, I'll ask him.
Another panel.
Yeah.
there are some other panels,
There are
but
more
It's
here.
kind of a,
why don't we start with this panel? This gentleman did say
Okay.
elementary school, so we can start with that.
Okay.
Senator Gallion, but we do have a number of other witnesses.
thank you,
Yeah.
Mr. Chair. One thing we deal about a lot in this committee and in the Senate, we talk a lot about local authority. So, I have 2 counties I represent. It seems to me like those counties are kind of figuring this stuff out at the local board level. And we hear a lot about book bans. That's the term you hear. It's like the red flag term that's thrown out all the time. So can you just name for me some books that have actually been banned that you have an issue with in the elementary schools?
So in elementary schools, the only one I'm familiar with in my school district is the book, The Wonky Donkey. And the Wonky Donkey.
Sir, I don't mean to interrupt, but can you get that mic close to
sorry.
you? Nobody can hear you. Yeah.
Sorry about that. The only book that I'm aware of in my district at the elementary level that has been banned is a book called The Wonky Donkey. It is a book about a donkey, and he's a little bit unusual. He has a lot of funny mannerisms, and we were instructed to remove it from our collections because it promoted bullying. But that is the only book that I know of that has been removed from an elementary school library in my district.
Okay, so I mean, that's a concern. So I have 4 daughters in elementary school right now. Okay. I mean, I'm not looking at saying, oh, we need to ban this and that, but I want to make sure my children, there's some protection there of some material that some would call borderline pornographic, that kind of stuff. But I think, isn't that already really being handled at these local levels? I mean, I know in Cecil County, I've talked to their superintendent about kind of their process. It seems like it's working in Cecil County. So if we can do it at the local level, why is that needed here?
And this is specific to the elementary schools.
Yeah.
Right.
Because we don't need 5 answers
Right,
for each
just
one of these.
specific to
So-
our elementary school.
Well, what,
Pick one, sir, from the elementary
So-
school.
So with our process, a pornographic book would not end up in an elementary school library. We have a very specific collection development process we follow. A book has to have 2 qualified reviews. And when we say 2 qualified reviews, I want to be clear, if one quality review says the book is appropriate for grades 3 through 5, and our book says, source says it's appropriate for grades 6 and 7. Well, that's not coming in my elementary school because it doesn't have 2 acceptable reviews that place it at an elementary school level. I do not know of any pornographic material that's getting that kind of review from an evaluation source. But even if it did, that book would certainly not end up in my elementary library because having a pornographic material in there would simply not be developmentally appropriate in any way.
So my understanding is then the system that you have in which county again are you? Charles, thank you, sir. It sounds like your system that's being done at the local level is working. So why do we need this if it's working at the local level? Is there another county that you feel like it's not working?
There are some counties that are certainly having some more issues and concerns come up than Charles. Carroll County comes to mind very specifically. In a little bit, we'll have a couple of librarians here from Carroll County, including an elementary and a high school librarian that might be able to speak a little more directly. Things are working well in my district, but that does not mean that things are working well in every district. So the goal of this is to create some standards while still retaining local control at the school district level.
Thank you for your answers. I may follow up with some future panels that he mentioned.
Thank you. Additional questions for this panel, Senator Simoner.
Thank you. We got the right panel up here. So welcome. Just to get back to the process, because I'm not a librarian, but I did some reading and I believe the elementary librarian said of it. But from what I understood, there's a review process, I think at least 2 reviews by the librarian. Then it's decided whether it should be included or not in the library. Then there's the possible, I don't know if all jurisdictions do it, can have an appeal process where parents could appeal it. And at that point, they would have maybe the teacher from that class, another maybe 3 people review the bill or the book again, and then make a determination. Is that pretty much the process?
So that's going to vary a little bit from system to system, but I can tell you that in Charles County, and this legislation does not attempt to remove any of this. There's still going to be a challenge process if parents do have concerns about a book that their child brings home. And in Charles County, that process begins with the school librarian. And a couple of times I have had, a book come to me and I've taken a look at it and I've agreed. I said, this book is probably more appropriate for the middle school, level. And we sent it next door kind of informally. Other times, and I've never had this happen, but there is a process where if after reading it, there's still a disagreement, they can file an appeal and that will convene a panel of teachers and librarians and to take a look at the book and assess the book, and everyone reads it cover to cover, and they make a determination at that point. And then from there, the parent following the challenge can appeal to the board.
Okay.
Yes.
Yeah.
So there's a process.
Okay. And I appreciate that. And I think some of the comments were a little over the top. We're not trying to be like Germany and burn the books. The parents that are contacting me are concerned primarily about age appropriate material being given to them at an age which they don't think is appropriate. It's not they're going to go out and burn all the books in the street. So I just think that's a little over the top. So I think what we've established is that the librarians can include or not include books in a library. Some call that banning a book. But at the same point, parents are trying to do the same thing, whether they should include or not include a book in the library, which they're calling banning the books. So I think we already have a process to ban books. It comes down to who gets to make that decision, who gets to ban a book. And I think that's at the heart of this legislation. But I had a question on access. In a library, when you have a card, I've looked up a couple different libraries and they're not all the same. If a 13-year-old, or let's just say a 6-year-old goes and wants to get a library card, I think they have to have a parent with them, probably in case they have late fees and things like that. And then if you're sometimes 13 or older, or sometimes 18 or older, you can get an adult card. Are there any restrictions on books based on your card that you get? In other words, can a child get out any book in the library?
I'm going to ask Sonia.
Thank you for that question. So in my library system in Baltimore County Public Library, we do have juvenile cards, which, like you described, the parent does need to sign off on it. And that's primarily for liability reasons, right? But it's also so that parents can be involved in what it is that their children are checking out and seeing what they're checking out and talking about what their kids are reading with their children. So it's one way that we support parents in our community. But in terms of what kids are allowed to check out, we do not police that. So we encourage parents to make the decisions for their children in terms of what they can and cannot read at the library, what they can and cannot check out. Sometimes kids read at advanced levels, more so than, so they might be reading at an adult level compared to their peers. Sometimes they might have an interest in a topic that you might find those books in the adult section of the library, but again, it's up to the parents to determine what books their children check out. The public library is not going to step in and make that determination on behalf of the parent.
Okay, so the short answer is there's no restriction what children can take out of a library.
Not at the public library, no.
Okay. Now, what about, I know they have, I don't know what they're called, DVDs or whatever today. They keep changing technology. Can a child take out an R-rated movie unrestricted?
Again, our policy is that a child can check out whatever materials that they want. It's up to their parents to step in and intervene and make that determination if they disagree with what their child is checking out from the library.
Okay, and I think that probably differs because I've read other libraries do not allow that. I don't know if it's a federal law or whatever, but rated R are not supposed to be for children under or children basically, unless they're with an accompanying parent. But your specific one doesn't at all, correct?
Correct. And every library is going to make the appropriate, have the appropriate policy that makes sense for their community. And we have governing library boards who approve all of our library policies. So our policy might look a little bit different from other public libraries in Maryland. But again, it's based on what rules have been established by that public library board for that system.
And while you may not agree with it, but you can see why some parents are concerned that you're just basically opening up the cabinet of potentially things that are not appropriate that elementary school would not permit in a school, but in a public library, they can come in and check out as much as they want. No problem. So I just have a couple questions, and I will also say I found it interesting. I looked this up. It said the American Library Association, which Maryland Library Association is a state member, supports equal and equitable access to all library resources and services by users of all ages, and opposes all attempts to restrict access to library services, materials, and facilities based on their age. So stated policy is give it to them all. That's what you want. And I think that's where the conflict comes in. You may disagree with me. I'm just saying that's where the conflict is. Now, just to the bill construction, I was going to ask the senator, but I don't know if you would be appropriate or somebody from the panel as far as the construction of the bill. Anybody want to take a stab at a bill? Okay.
Depends on what you're gonna ask.
Okay, on page 2, line 22. The language starts saying this is a goal. And then it goes down and it said, it should be information. It should be based on, it should not remove. It's the intent in libraries. Those are all suggestions. Those are not mandates. Is that the intent of this legislation, that just you're making a strong recommendation?
That's the intent of this part of the legislation.
Okay, so what comes from that is you mandate to the locals that they have to come up with a written policy similar to this, or you'll take the funding away from them, which would hurt the recipients, not the librarians, just as a point. But if these are suggestions and the locals put in suggestions, how can you prohibit local jurisdictions from taking action on a suggestion?
Well, that's why we want to codify this and through the state standards. So the state standards would codify the values that libraries have, and including access for all people. And in addition, it would require that each school library system and public library system adopt a written policy statement that advocates that all Marylanders have the freedom to read.
I read the bill. I understand that part, but my
Right.
point is it's a suggestion.
Well, it's in the way it's written here, it looks to me like, because it says, it is the goal and should be provided. But when it gets down to page 3 at the top, line 3, or line 1, a library should not prohibit or remove material from its catalog because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. That's
Right.
not a suggestion. That's a should not.
No, that's the
Well,
same
it
as the other
still
one.
doesn't say shall not, but
Right.
right.
It's a suggestion. So how can you prohibit a local jurisdiction who you're authorizing them to put a suggestion in their policy? And a suggestion is you could do it or you could not do it.
Well,
And that-
that's not how it would play out in the policy, though. It would be that I'm not going to tell them how to write the policy, but there are critical factors that will go into the policy. The right to read, the authority of the library to provide adequate library services, and requirement that librarians, educators, and library staff curate and develop collections and a materials reconsideration policy. So I'm not going to dictate from the state level what's in each policy, but these are the
understand.
areas that need to be covered. And then they would then require approval by their board, whether it's a public library board or a school library
All right,
board.
I'll try one more time and then I'll leave it at that point.
Okay.
If the state standard, which is supposed to be implemented at the local level, is an option to do these things.
I don't believe the state standard is an option.
Well, the way it's drafted said they should,
Okay, well,
which is
then
not
we
a shall.
need an attorney in the room, I think, to.
Well, I've checked with legal counsel. It's an option. And so that's how are you mandating that they have to do these, or is it your intent that is an option?
No, the intent is to mandate that they follow the state standards for libraries, and that they have this policy in place with the criteria I just outlined.
Okay.
So perhaps
save my
we need to
questions
go
for the
back
other
to the
time.
drawing board on this one.
Okay, Senator Brooks.
Thanks, Chair. And first, I just want to give a shout out to the CEO of Baltimore County Library, Ms. Alcantara Antoine, and then Ms. Watson, also from Baltimore County Library. Thank. I do have a question now. Do you prevent kids from bringing cell phones into the library?
No, we do not.
Okay, so if a child wanted to gain access to pornographic information, wouldn't this be a very easy source for them to do that?
Yes, I think so.
Okay, all right, thank you. Thanks.
Okay. And we have a lot of other witnesses. Okay, yes, Senator Carozza.
I'm not sure who should answer the question, but it seems like as we're looking at this legislation, you seem to have a lot of the concerns are on the school library side. where, you know, you don't have the parents there with the child. And my understanding is locally, some school libraries currently provide a parent the ability to identify materials that a parent doesn't want their children to see, and that library database could be updated so that if there would be kind of a flag if the child tried to check out those materials that they're not allowed to. And if that's the case, and that's been something that's been worked out locally and appears to work, does this legislation now prevent that practice from occurring?
And I just would remind everybody on the committee, we do have 20 additional witnesses. So therefore, if you can't answer it, I suspect that somebody behind you might be in a better position to answer it. You can say that, that might be.
I'm going to let them answer.
Okay, then might be the same for the next question I have, which would be, if you look at the reference that was just noted, page 3, I think it's lines 1 and 2. A library should not prohibit or remove material from its catalog because of partisan or doctrinal disapproval. The bill does not define partisan or doctrinal. So what's the criteria?
So I think we need to remain
So
silent on
you
that.
got to put the mic.
Yeah, some of these questions may need to go back to the senator.
Okay, well.
Okay, but you can understand that if you use terms like that and there's no definition, it opens up additional questions.
I certainly understand. I just reworked another bill with a lot of amendments, so I understand how that process works.
Thank you.
Okay, additional questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, thank you. Okay, I'm going to call one more favorable panel, then just balance it out. There are some unfavorables. I'll bring them up after that, and then we'll go back. Cheryl Boast here. Okay, Ms. Boast. This is again another favorable panel, and then we'll go to some unfavorables. Lori Owings. Is Owings here?
Yep.
Okay, we're gonna go Jeremy Browning here. Is Jeremy Browning here? Mr. Browning. Okay, Lindsay Ward. We're just gonna fill up the table. Catherine Berlin. Okay, we got one more seat. Kenzie Funk. Okay, so that will be this panel, and then, like as I say, we'll go to some unfavorables after this. Okay, Ms. Boast, why don't you lead off? The mic's right in front of you, okay? And each of you's got 2 minutes.
Thank you. I'm still Cheryl Boast, a 4th and 5th grade teacher from Baltimore County, proudly serving as the president of the Maryland State Education Association, which represents over 75,000 educators across the state. Across the United States, public schools and libraries continue to face a wave of politically motivated attempts to ban, restrict, and otherwise censor books and educational materials that celebrate diversity and grapple honestly with history. We know that these extremist campaigns often target Black, brown, and LGBTQ authors. And although most people, as you heard earlier, oppose book banning, we have seen how a small number of people using websites to target books seek to politicize learning and can impact the education of all kids. It is across our state starting to bubble up, and this legislation seeks to put a process in place so that everyone is following a process that allows for a review and reconsideration of books, but also looks to trust the professionalism of our public school libraries, librarians, and our public librarians. They have gone to school. They work together to look at the professional collection, which is age appropriate, content appropriate, and works with the curriculum. Our students suffer when they are denied a complete education, which teaches them to think critically about real world topics and work towards a better future. They suffer not only when books are removed from shelves, but also from the chilling effect that these bans or assertions that we're doing harm have everywhere when library media specialists then hesitate to put quality resources on display, or when teachers are encouraged to end classroom discussions or not having them at all. This legislation is modeled after laws in other states that have already taken action to deter politically motivated bans or for partisan reasons. It protects our students' right to learn about a diverse range of experiences and perspectives, and ensures that educators can continue to use their professional judgment to evaluate these materials. As the senator said, it is unfortunate that we are at this point, but this provides a baseline across the state. And so this legislation has never been more timely or necessary, and we urge support for Maryland students when you support Maryland's Freedom to Read Act. Thank you.
Okay.
Let me go.
Yeah, just why don't you go right there?
Hi, my name is Laurie Owings. I'm a school librarian in Maryland, and like many of my fellow librarians, I love to share stories. However, the story I bring to you today is a dark tale unfolding across our state. Over the past year, local chapters of a national organization orchestrated an attack on books in public school libraries. In my county, members of the local chapter completed over 30 reconsideration forms, now over 60, to have books removed from school libraries, books they never read. They attended board meetings and read passages out of context. Following one of those board meetings, we learned about a new review form that must be completed and signed for every book we order. I will pause here to add that I ordered close to 550 books last school year. The message was that more accountability would be placed on the school librarians. It is too early to provide detailed information on how these changes will affect our students, but I can tell you that there are schools not ordering any books this year because the librarians are concerned about the review form. I can tell you that there are librarians afraid to conduct book talks or make recommendations. I can tell you that a colleague has asked several times for written confirmation that she will not be fired for purchasing a book that someone later deems inappropriate. She has yet to receive this confirmation. And I can tell you that nearly every school librarian I know have considered transferring or leaving their role completely due to this chilling effect. I cannot tell you how this tale will end, but let me close with this. The Freedom to Read Act safeguards librarians and our selection process. The act provides trust in us to be the professionals that we are. And finally, it gives our students and citizens of Maryland the freedom to read. Please support Senate Bill 738. Thank you.
Okay, thank you.
My name is Catherine Burling. I'm a school librarian in Maryland. This school year by far has been my most challenging. In August, our school library supervisor was abruptly reassigned to a classroom teaching position. Without a leader or advocate, we have had to advocate for ourselves, our students, and our collections. We are grateful and hopeful to know that we have other advocates working hard to pass this Freedom to Read Act. In our county, 60 library books were selected for the reconsideration process. Most are still under consideration, but a few of the retained books now require a permission slip to browse or to check out. Other books have had to be stored in boxes indefinitely. The book reconsiderations have not reached our elementary school collections yet. However, having to fill out and sign off the newly required book review form and read each of the hundreds of books I want to purchase does impact me. When asked why the need for the signature, we were told our signature is a good faith effort. We do not feel trusted or respected. After all, if our supervisor can be removed, who is to say that we can't be? When we expressed concern over the amount of time these new requirements would take, it was suggested that we order fewer books, and that alone feels like a form of censorship. For all of these reasons, for the first time in 9 years, I have made the difficult choice not to order books for our library this year, including books that students and teachers request. If not stopped now, these issues will continue to be raised in other Maryland counties. These issues are furthering a divide in our school communities and removing students' rights to read library books. Unfortunately, political interests in separate counties have changed the way school libraries function. Therefore, a universal system is needed in Maryland. We feel it is important to have a seat at the table when decisions are being made regarding our libraries. We are pleading for you to consider moving forward with the Freedom to Read Act to allow all of our students the opportunity to read books from our professionally curated collections and allow our school librarians to once again develop collections that we know our students and colleagues deserve. Please support Senate Bill 738.
Okay, let's go to the other end of the table.
Thank you, Chair Feldman and Vice Chair Kagan and members of this committee. My name is Kenzie Funk, and I'm here on behalf of Strong Schools Maryland as a policy associate in strong support of Senate Bill 738. We appreciate the sponsoring senators for creating a bill that solidifies and protects not only the duties and the responsibilities of our librarians, but also the free dissemination of information and stories that reflect the very real and diverse array of experiences of Maryland students. Protecting the rights of our students and the duties of our educators has become absolutely necessary, as some have tried to exclude and censor the types of stories being told in schools. Book bans have been enacted in districts across 33 different states in the US, banning books that include stories of LGBTQ youth, Black and Brown children, and children of different backgrounds and religious faiths. What is the result? They cause actual harm to students, most often the students from marginalized communities. Limiting the access that children have to stories that reflect their real lived experiences will provide them with the information to empower them. In the national survey published by First Book, 78% of children read more when given the option to explore a greater variety of books, including many books that have been banned in other districts throughout other states. Moreover, the overwhelming majority of educators feel that even conversations surrounding book bans negatively impacts the school climate and student engagement. When legislation such as Senate Bill 738 is not passed, it leaves the door open for the introduction of bans that actively censor what appears in our school libraries. Librarians receive education and guidance protocols to curate a collection of books for their students. We urge the Maryland General Assembly to protect the ability of the librarians to fulfill their professional duty and to protect the access that children have to their world-class libraries and education systems. For these reasons, we urge a favorable report on Senate Bill 738. Thank you.
Okay.
Good afternoon. I am not Lindsay Ward, but we are colleagues. My name is Dr. JD Murphy, and I'm a pediatric nurse practitioner. I'm faculty at the Johns Hopkins University School of Nursing. And on behalf of the over 200 members of the Maryland chapter of the National Association of Pediatric Nurse Practitioners, we stand in support of this bill. We are saddened by the amount of misinformation that's being spread, that certain books are harmful to children, that they are sexualizing children and putting them at risk for mental distress, because this is frankly not true. Books are actually protective. They allow for the safe exploration of certain topics that children may not experience in their normal daily lives. They allow for children to feel included when they might not feel included in their schools or their communities. And these measures have been found to significantly reduce the suicide rates of our most marginalized youth. We encourage parents and caregivers who are concerned about the books their children might be reading in their schools to be more involved in your schools, be more involved in what books your children are coming home with, check their backpacks, talk to their teachers, and exercise your parental rights. But you also have the right to parental school choice. And I, as a parent of Carroll County Public School children, also deserve the right to determine what books my children have access to. And so as experts in pediatrics and advocates for the health and well-being of children, NAPNAP supports passing of this bill, and we urge a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay, sir.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. My name is Jeremy Browning. I use he, him pronouns, and I'm the director of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA+ affairs. Preventing book bans is a top priority for the commission. We want to thank Senator King and the other sponsors for bringing this bill forward. We are deeply concerned about the recent wave of book bans targeting materials with LGBTQIA+ content and characters. This censorship not only restricts access to important literary works, but also seeks to erase LGBTQIA+ individuals and families from public life, perpetuating discrimination and marginalization. LGBTQIA+ students, individuals, and families deserve to see themselves represented in our public and school libraries. Representation matters. Representation equals visibility, and visibility equals safety. The Freedom to Read Act will ensure that books containing LGBTQI+ characters and content will remain on library shelves for the enjoyment and enlightenment of the public our libraries serve. By incorporating these standards into library operations and policies, we can ensure that libraries remain inclusive spaces where diverse identities and voices are celebrated and respected. For these reasons, the Commission strongly urges a favorable report on Senate Bill 738. Thank you.
Okay, let's open up questions for this panel. Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. I'm just trying to figure out where the line is between would you consider going too far with banning material and protecting elementary school children from material that is inappropriate for their ages. Where do you see that line?
I mean, we see that the librarians have site standards that they look to, and if it fits the curriculum and if it's age appropriate. And so they go through that curation process to make sure books are age appropriate and meet the curriculum that those students are reading. As you heard from the previous gentleman, if it's deemed not appropriate for elementary school students, but it's deemed appropriate for middle, then it goes to the middle school.
So is this issue, let's just cut down to it. Is this about one county?
No, we're not seeing it in one county. We're seeing it across the state of Maryland, where people are going to websites, seeing 2 lines of a book that they've never read, and it's on a site on how to ban books. And then they bring that up for a confrontation to be removed from the school. In one of our counties, all the books were removed before they were reviewed, which didn't follow their county policy. We have heard that groups are now targeting Cecil County, Howard County, Montgomery County. And they're saying that in their own language that they're going to target these counties. And so this is trying to get a baseline across the state so that people who want to challenge books know what the process is, and people who are curating and our librarians will also know what the process is.
Okay, I got just one more question, Mr. Chair. I know a lot of times in these debates, somebody will quote a line in a book kind of almost like for shock value. I'm not going to do that. You know, we're not going to do that. But I would like to know, because you mentioned it, you said that one of the issues with the things being banned were things were taken out of context.
Mm-hmm.
So I guess a certain phrasing or whatever. Can you just give me one example of that? Like what was taken out of context that a book got banned over that?
I don't have an example. I have seen the website that has that, and one of the standards that is to be in place is if you're pushing something to be banned, that you've actually read the entire book, or being taken off the shelf is that you've read the entire book, not just an excerpt of the book. I don't have an example.
I'd just be curious to see like if one sentence, what that is that got a hold. So we can look farther into that. Thank you.
Okay, Senator Caruso.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. And my colleague from Hartford and Cecil counties in an earlier question was talking about what was going on locally. And, you know, we had a witness that said, you know, well, it's fine in mine and, you know, but there's all these other problems. And my question is there anything in the legislation that would allow for reasonable input by local boards of education, governing bodies, parents, community members who are taxpayer funds are paying for the libraries, to have any reasonable input into this process where we are kind of giving that sole authority to the libraries? And I'm really focusing on the school libraries.
Right. I unfortunately I don't have the legislation or know it line by line, but my understanding of it is the standards, there'll be set standards as you see in there. And then it'll still be up to the local boards of education. And many boards of education include community representatives or parents on their review panels.
Okay, because right now, you know, when you hear the focus on local flexibility, local control, because that does then involve, you know, at the local level, the local boards of education, the parents, the community members. And, you know, looking at this legislation, and I really want to go through it because line by line, we're kind of, taking pieces out and asking questions, but it'd be very concerning that if the impact of this legislation, that if the result is we basically have kind of, neutered our local boards of education, our parents, our community, it just, that should not be the intention of this.
That is not the intent of the bill.
So I'm
But that's why there is local
so I guess
authority.
I think we may need to clarify that because
Okay.
I can't find it in the bill.
Okay, let's go to Senator Washington next.
Thank you, and I appreciate what you're doing. I appreciate the bill. I just wanted to clarify. So on the one hand, there's a concern about the control of our state, of our boards of it, our local boards, or what individual parents protection. But I think I just heard something very disturbing, and apparently it's happening across the country where books are simply disappearing from K through 12 classrooms across the country and across the state. And that the fear that because someone may find offense to something, that there is this unprecedented flood of ammunition to remove all types of books, regardless of just as a proactive way. Is that you're saying? So the thing that you're concerned is that we won't have any books, and that librarians won't feel protected, or that our students won't get a number of maybe even classics, because there might be some classics that have references that may be deemed inappropriate, particularly if they use something like AI or something, just looking for certain words as a way of rejecting a book. Is that the other threat that we're trying to balance?
There is the shadow banning, where people are going into libraries and just checking out the books and never bringing them back so that no one else can read them. And that's happening. Several people reported that during Black History Month, that we're still in, that if they put out a display, that people went into public libraries and took them all out and are not going to allow people to read those books.
And also, just to be clear, it's not just, there are books about, the penguin has two daddies,
Right.
and those type, but it's also books about women and sexism, history of sexism, race, there like a lot of books. So it's not just, one community or one
No,
type.
it's
There's a
not.
full range that are being.
No, and as someone said, in Carroll
I just
County,
wanna
it's over
clarify.
50 labels.
Yeah, okay.
Okay, additional questions, Senator Simon.
Thank you. I'm trying to look for a balanced approach. That's what I try to do. And I keep hearing this is a political, but I haven't gotten one correspondence to my office said, hey, I'm a Republican or I'm a Democrat and I oppose this. They say I'm a parent. So to me, from what I'm hearing, this is a parental concern, not a political concern. They may have political views, but it's primarily parental. And Cheryl, I think you mentioned that we need to trust the professionals. They've gone to school and so forth. Just not plenary trust, where it's all with them. And I think that's where the problem is. We've already established that the library system removes books or doesn't allow books from the system. They ban them. So it comes down to who gets to, if you want to use that terminology, who gets to ban the books. And I don't think parents want to give 100% of the authority to the librarians. While we value their efforts, every person's different. Every person has different worldviews. Everybody has different opinions of what's appropriate for a young child versus another person. And I think the parents are saying, we want to be involved in that process. And it's not like the librarians are elected and they're accountable to the people, because I heard one witness said they want to provide more accountability. Yes, we want more accountability. We want more transparency. So I'm just trying to figure out, how do we get that balance where you don't throw the books out in the street and start burning them, but you also don't provide all this information. Any age can come and get inappropriate material that a lot of parents think are inappropriate, whether it's sexual or graphic or whatever. And so if you have suggestions for that, I'd love to get offline, provide them to me so we can try to work towards that. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, Senator Lewis, I don't think that was necessarily, Senator Lewis, yeah, it was a request. Senator Lewis, yeah.
Thank you so much, Mr. Chair. I had a very similar bill drafted. And in fact, it was so similar, I withdrew it because it was redundant. So I want to see if this is your understanding of how this bill works, that at the state level, rather broad guidelines would be set up. Not, you can't have this book or that book, but not pornographic materials, things like that. And then at the local level, that decisions would be made with respect to those broader guidelines. And I saw an example of this work in my community. So again, I want to verify if this is your understanding. There were very public hearings on a number of books. I think there was a group of citizens that recommended 32 books be banned. And ultimately, the local Board of Ed banned 2 of those books. So there was a lot of community input in the process, but ultimately the decision was made by the Board of Ed. So is my understanding correct, both in terms of the legislative intent as well as how the process would work? Is that correct?
Yes, I believe that is the correct understanding.
Thank you.
Okay, any additional questions for this panel? Okay, seeing none, let's go to a couple of unfavorables to balance things out. We do have 2 witnesses signed up unfavorable. I see Paul Ellington here in the house, and I'm sorry. Yeah, we're gonna go back to more favorables after we take a couple unfavorables. There's only 2 unfavorables signed up, Paul Ellington and Lorna Henry. And then after that, we'll go back and pick up the rest of the witnesses on the favorable side. So Mr. Ellington, Ms. Henry, why don't we take you 2, and Mr. Ellington, you want to start off?
Certainly.
Okay.
Thank you. My name is Paul Ellington. I'm here representing the Worcester County Commissioners who are opposed to the legislation as proposed, and because they contend that it would strip the local boards of education and governed bodies, parents, and community members from having input into the materials that minors may access in certain libraries, but specifically public school libraries. Unlike the Motion Picture Association of America's rating system, which restricts minors' access to explicit material, there's no similar ratings system that protects minors from intentionally or inadvertently accessing explicit materials in schools and public libraries. Therefore, it is incumbent upon local elected officials, boards of education, governing bodies, and parents and community members whose tax dollars fund these libraries to have responsible authority for both hard copy and virtual content. Because not all of hard copy and virtual content is appropriate for all audiences, it's urged that the commissioners and other locally elected officials be able to maintain protections in keeping with federal law that safeguards children, respects the right of parents, and assures the decision-making authority of local governments and Board of Educations without the threat of financial repercussions. This bill has quite an impressive array of sponsors, so therefore we would respectfully consider that some amendments be added. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Ellington. Okay.
Good afternoon, Chair Feldman and members of the committee. Thank you for the opportunity to testify. My name is Lorna Henry. I'm an attorney with the Pacific Justice Institute, a nonprofit law firm focused on religious freedoms, parental rights, and other civil liberties. And we oppose this legislation. I don't think I can stress enough that one of the fundamental issues of this bill is not the intent of the bill. It is the manner in which it seeks to promote a subjective philosophy of what is appropriate reading material in a library determined by the state rather than local communities. Under this bill, the way it reads is that libraries would adopt a state standard that includes removing from its library anything that expresses partisan or doctrinal disapproval. And that term is not defined in the legislation and is subject to multiple interpretations, and I would say multiple misinterpretations as well. And that I think should be very concerning. It is important that local school boards and communities retain local control over the operation of their libraries for a number of reasons. Local control gives parents and community members an opportunity to participate in the decision-making process. Local control allows flexibility in shaping and structuring programs. This bill, as it currently reads, would undermine local autonomy, and that is necessary to ensure that communities' needs are met, parents' voices are heard, and children excel to their fullest. And I would just end by saying the freedom to read is not an unchecked freedom of choice for young 6 and 7-year-olds and young children alike to read whatever they want. And I think that aspect should be considered as we consider this bill. I respectfully ask that you issue an unfavorable report to this bill. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Questions for either Mr. Ellington or Ms. Henry, Senator Washington.
Thank you. And I appreciate the Worcester County's willingness to find a way forward together on this. I appreciate it. Just a question to you about, you mentioned age. So should there be at certain ages that there's more? I mean, are you looking for something like that there be this sort of, that there be some distinction by age on access to books?
When looking at
I'm trying to say, I agree with you about partisan and doctrinal. So I agree with you that those words aren't appropriate. So trying to seek what would be the guidelines, because we set state guidelines in a number of areas. So what would be some guidelines or words that we could use that you think would be fair to parents?
Well, I think first it needs to be considered how we determine what is partisan and doctrinal disapproval. And we're in agreement that's not good. So one group of people could say, oh, this is good for 5 and 6-year-olds. One set of another group of people could say it's not. So I'm not a lawmaker, but I think that needs to be in the bill. How do we determine what is approved for young children? I don't have an answer to that, and the bill doesn't speak to that, but it should speak to that. And that's my concern, not necessarily finding out a clear answer, but having a mechanism to address the question so that it can be answered. And right now, there is nothing in this bill that would even address that question.
And so referencing the opinions of people who are experts in early childhood education, who are familiar with psychological, social, emotional development, that those professionals would be in a good position to help define what would be appropriate.
I would probably say that parents would even have concerns with that, because a professional's opinion and sentiment is constantly evolving. And I think the best avenue to make sure that children are protected is to keep it at the local level. I don't see why that would not work. And there's no solution that has been presented at, on the state level that, in my opinion, would be better than keeping it at the local level.
It just want to just clarify my read of, again, we're getting rid of the doctrinal. We'll just find some other. It's still, the decision is at the local level. It's just, as we do in a number of things, we set sort of guidelines and sort of standards by which we encourage local boards to make decisions. So the final decision is still at the local level. So I think that that's where we're trying to look at, where can there be some agreement about what criteria can be used, and then so that locals can use that as a guidance. That's my understanding of the legislation, or at least the intent to get us to, that's where the legislation is. So I'd look forward to, I know we have.
Okay, well, I don't think you're going to resolve this.
There's
There's just sort of, I think, a different read on.
Yep.
Okay, any additional questions of this panel on the unfavorable side? Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, we're going to go through the remainder of the witnesses now. We do have 3 in-person witnesses, 3 virtual, and then we will be done. I'm going to call up, is Skip Ald here still? Frank Pettinella and Claire Hill. Those are the 3 remaining in-person favorable witnesses, and then we're going to pick up 3 virtual, and then this bill will be complete. Okay, sir, who are you? You're on the 2-minute clock.
Thank you. I'm Skip Ald, Chief Executive Officer of Anne Arundel County Public Library. Chair Feldman and esteemed members of this Education, Energy, and the Environment Committee. First of all, thank you for being here all this time. It's a marathon. Why is the Freedom to Read Act necessary? Because as a state, we need to enshrine in law the ability for librarians to do their job working with parents, children, teens, and everyone who walks through our doors. I'm a librarian. I've been a librarian for more than 40 years. Throughout my career, my colleagues and I have selected books for library shelves because they're important, even life-saving in some cases. Take a moment and think about the librarians and school teachers you know. We all care deeply about and work really hard to get the right book into the right hands, whether our students are and customers are adults, teens, or children. But it's getting harder to do our jobs because small groups of parents want to block access for other people's children. Our nation, our state, and every locality throughout our great state are in the throes of fear-mongering, massive misunderstandings, and misguided attempts to seal off from everyone the books that some people are afraid of. At the hearing on this bill in the House 2 days ago, an opponent of the book denounced a book called Let's Talk About It, The Teen's Guide to Sex, Relationships, and Being a Human. It's a universal truth that teens strive to know who they are and to understand their sexuality. For some, these are very difficult years. Some teens fall into depression. Some find life so hard that they kill themselves. Finding Let's Talk About It, Genderqueer, and other high-quality books in libraries' curated collections will save some of their lives. That's why I'm proud to support this bill.
Okay, thank you, sir. Next up.
Excuse me. Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, Vice Chair, and members of the committee. My name is Frank Pettinella, and I'm a senior policy advocate for the ACLU of Maryland. We are in full support of Senate Bill 738, which we feel is long overdue as the basic tenets of our democracy and right to free speech have been under attack. We are aligned with the bill's goal to ensure that the state establish clear standards for how our public libraries in the community and schools operate. Nearly 3,500 books have been banned across the country last school year, and overwhelmingly these bans have targeted books about race and racism, the histories and lived experiences of Black people and other people of color, and the LGBTQ plus community. We strongly contend that both adults and children have a constitutional right to be able to access a wide inventory of books, materials, and resources from a myriad of perspectives to foster knowledge and understanding about our diverse world. Our libraries play an essential role in upholding the principles of our democracy, which encourages discussion and debate about everything, including topics that some may find uncomfortable or disagreeable. Allowing books to be banned on special interest groups' partisan or doctrinal views is censorship and a violation of our First Amendment rights. Further, allowing bans on books that target people of color and people from the LGBTQ plus community is discrimination. Lastly, we agree with the bill's intent to protect librarians and staff from getting dismissed, reassigned, or punished for acting in a manner consistent with the state's standards for libraries. We urge you to put an end to the attacks on marginalized people and give Senate Bill 738 a favorable report. Thank you.
Okay.
Hello, my name is Claire Hill. Thank you for allowing me to talk about Senate Bill 0738, Maryland's Freedom to Read Act, a bill I totally support. I am a former volunteer of a banned book review committee for Calvert County and a parent of 2 children who have left private schools to attend public schools for the quality and stellar education. Passage of this bill would only be a first step. I believe the bill has merit. I believe it needs more teeth. I in an effort to address serious problems in our county schools that, if not resolved, will result in permanent harm to our team of professional librarians and a slippery slope towards dumbing down our students. I applaud the focus on libraries in the bill. They're a huge foundation of learning in both school and public libraries settings. I applaud the fact that the bill recognized fundamental tenets of any library, providing services to all persons and not prohibiting material because of the author or partisan disapproval. But other than some introductory comments about these ideas, the bill is silent about how to deal with the problem that is wreaking havoc in our public schools, the effort to ban and soft censor books. I realize our public schools are under local control, but this bill should lay out a statewide standard on how to deal with an unreasonable infringement upon parental rights by limiting access to books adversely impacting our public school curriculum. I think standards can be put in place that do not infringe upon those parents, their own sense of free speech. I suggest one step, the parents who raise complaints and would like a book banned are required to put up monetary deposit if they wish to have the book removed. This is no different than any other cost associated with charges for services from public employees working to address a citizen's request. In conclusion, please look farther on how we can better take care of our fabulous librarians. Additionally, please take a bold step towards standing up to unrelenting attacks against advances we've made in the areas of inclusion, equity, psychological safety, and other civil rights. Attacks played out through the attempts to ban and soft censor books because the books do not reflect the personal belief or system of just a few individuals. Thank you.
Okay, any questions for this panel? Yes, Senator Gallion.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. So one question was kind of addressed a little bit on the last panel, but I just wanted to follow up with this one. The issue of somebody doesn't like a book, they go and they just take it out and they check it out or whatever, and never bring it back. This legislature has passed bills in recent years. There was another one to add on to that this year that pretty much removes any fine for not returning a book. Do you see that as a problem?
I can speak to that. No, I think that eliminating the fines has been tremendous. And in Anne Arundel County, we've eliminated not just for youth, but for adults as well. And I think that that was an important and valuable decision. I believe it was last summer we had someone at one of our libraries in the month of June. We typically have pride displays, books about LGBT topics. And so that person, we learned in August when the person came back that she had gone to the display, taken all 30 or 40 books, checked them out, kept them out that whole summer, and brought them back and said, and gleefully, really, I'm so glad that nobody else could get these books. So I think that's abominable. And that's what this bill would focus on.
So they could do that though, and never bring the books back. It would not have to pay a dime, right?
They would have to pay. If they never brought them back, they're going to be charged for the books plus processing fees. The fines are eliminated when the books are brought back. So that person took the books out, they went into lost status, but as soon as they come back in, it clears. And so there's no fine.
So as long as they bring them back, it could be 2 months, 3 months later, there's no financial
It could be many months later, yes, and there's no charge as long as you bring them back. But that's not the point of this bill. This bill essentially takes aim at people who do this intentionally to try to keep books away from other people. That's a pretty blatant example, and I think that it's the kind of thing that would be helped by this bill.
Any additional questions for the panel? Okay, seeing none, we do have the final witnesses. We've got three virtual witnesses. Jaden Ferris, Mr. Ferris on the line, Nicole Hollywood, and Wendy Novak. Those are the three witnesses. So, Mr. Ferris, we see you, and why don't you start? And again, you've 2 minutes. Then we'll go to Ms. Hollywood, and then see where we are. Okay, why don't you start, Mr. Ferris?
Good afternoon. Jaden Ferris, representing Glisson, Maryland, a chapter of Glisson National, the leading organization centered on creating and sustaining inclusive K-12 education. Glisson, Maryland supports the Freedom to Read Act. Since 2021, requests to remove books from schools and libraries has experienced an enormous surge. Libraries are facing coordinated challenges to a long list of titles submitted by organized political groups. PEN America found that more than 60% of challenge titles have LGBTQ plus themes or on topics of race or both. Maryland, unfortunately, has not escaped these attempts. This past school year, Carroll County removed 9 books so far on a variety of topics and later adopted a policy targeted on books that are quote unquote sexually explicit. And Wacomico County removed All Boys Aren't Blue without a formal review. This is just the tip of the iceberg. All children in Maryland public schools deserve to see themselves and their families represented in books in their school libraries, and this includes LGBTQ plus students. Inclusive reading material improves educational outcomes for all students. When students are exposed to diverse perspectives and the experience of others, they develop stronger critical thinking skills, improved empathy, and stronger interpersonal skills. Books, as Dr. Rudine Sims Bishop so poignantly stated, are more than mere text on pages. They are windows offering glimpses into realities both familiar and strange. They are sliding glass doors, inviting us to step into diverse narratives and walk alongside characters whose experiences may differ vastly from our own. For many in the LGBTQ plus community, these books are not just stories. They are mirrors reflecting identities long relegated to the shadows. As accordingly, Glisson, Maryland respectfully request a favorable committee report on Senate Bill 738. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Nicole Hollywood, you can be next. You're next.
Thank you. Greetings. My name is Nicole Hollywood. I'm a professor in the University System of Maryland, a member of the Maryland Commission for LGBTQIA plus Affairs, and a board member of PFLAG Salisbury. I'm submitting this testimony in favor of SB 738 on behalf of PFLAG Salisbury, the Salisbury, Maryland chapter of PFLAG National. Banning books is expensive and forces counties to divert crucial time and resources to address insidious efforts to curtail students' freedom to read, the result of which hurts students and communities. In a September release, the American Library Association's Office of Intellectual Freedom reported that the number of unique titles challenged in the first 8 months of 2023 jumped 20% over 2022, with most of the challenges relating to books written by or about person of color or members of the LGBTQIA plus community. GLAD explains book bans violate First Amendment rights, the rights of parents to decide what's best for their children, waste taxpayer money and resources, undermine the ability of teachers and librarians to effectively manage their classrooms and book collections, and above all, block the essential right of children to learn about themselves and the world while seeing themselves reflected in the pages of a book. Salisbury PFLAG supports this legislation and recommends a favorable report in committee. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, our next and final virtual witness, Wendy Novak, and after that, we'll take any questions for the 3 virtual witnesses. Wendy Novak, unmute yourself. Okay, you're on the 2-minute clock.
I'm a member of the Maryland Commission on LGBTQIA plus Affairs, Sunday school teacher, and a passionate reader. So magical. Reading is the key to lifelong learning and helps grow vocabulary. Reading shows that high quality library programs are correlated to student achievement and can help close the racial achievement gaps. We need to be doing what we can to support students by providing access to a variety of books. Sadly, some parents want to restrict access for all students, not just their own. There have been huge increase in attempts to restrict what books are available for our children to read. In Carroll County, more than 56 titles from the school libraries were removed from shelves in response to challenges. The challenge books included a disproportionate amount of female and non-binary authors and a disproportionate amount of LGBTQ characters and characters of color. Books that are frequently used for APA curriculum and exams were included on that list, such as Slaughterhouse-Five, Bluest Eye, and The Handmaid's Tale. Parents are determining what is available in our library. Parents that believe LGBTQ students are not appropriate for their kids to know they exist. These parents are not qualified to determine what should be available in our schools. Carroll created a sexually explicit materials policy that is so vague it is certain to be biased against our LGBTQ community and or students of color. It's not equitable that a student in one county might not have access to materials that interest or represent them because their county will not allow it.
Advanced readers at the oldest grade in their school cannot access books above their level due to current policy. Readers can discuss with their own parents, can discuss with their own child to determine what books they feel appropriate. Our librarians are trained to create a selection of materials that best serve their population, which includes a diverse collection of books to provide children with windows into other worlds and mirrors into their own. State standards will allow librarians to create the high quality libraries our students need. I request a favorable report on Senate Bill 738.
Okay, any questions for any of our three virtual witnesses? Okay, seeing none, that concludes the bill hearing on Senate Bill 738 and concludes our bill hearings for today. Folks, with that, for vote, we're going to do some voting in a little bit. We'll take a break and get something to eat, whether it's pizza or anything else. How long does everybody want before we convene back here to do some voting? Let's throw some numbers. How long do you want? Okay, so it's 2 o'clock.
Sure.
What is your okay, here. Let's go hard, hard 2:30, not Senate time 2:30. Okay, be back here at 2:30 and then let's jam out some bills. Okay.